I want to welcome everyone today on behalf of the Arkansas Small Business and Technology Development Center and the Arkansas Apex Accelerator. Thank you for joining us today for participating in the DoD's SBIR STTR programs. I'm Meredith Thomas, and I'll be your webinar moderator today. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items I want to cover. There was a handout for today's presentation, and you should have received that in your email yesterday to allow you to follow along. If you didn't get a chance to download that or check it out, I also dropped it in the chat for you. So if you'll click on chat down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there, and you should be able to download it. We will be recording the webinar today, and I will send that out to everyone in attendance. So as we go along, if you missed something and you need to go back and listen, that will be available to you. Cameras and mics will be turned off during this webinar. However, you will be able to participate if you have questions. If you put them in the Q&A box, you'll see Q&A at the bottom of your screen. They're more likely to get addressed there. You can drop them in the chat as well, but the chat does like a continuous feed, and it's a little bit easier for them to get lost along the way. So if you put those in the Q&A, we'll address those as we go along. So Karen Berg, she's our innovation specialist here at ASBTDC, and she's your host today. And I will let her introduce our partners and our guest speakers. So Karen, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Meredith. I just want to welcome everybody and say on behalf of the ASBTDC, we're glad that you're here. And if you're here, it is probably a sign that you have at least heard of SBIR STTR, or maybe you're here for a refresher, and we welcome all. I work for ASBTDC as an innovation specialist dedicated to assisting technology-based companies with SBIR STTR applications. And if you were here, and I was kind of grinning to myself as I looked at Jim's title, it says abbreviated Department of Defense. Well, I want to first thank you for coming for what is the beginning of, I hope, a long journey for you, because if you work with the federal government as a supplier through this commercialization program, you're in it for the long haul. And these are long game relationships that we're building. And Jim is like an expert at introducing you to the way to start building those, and especially DoD, because the DoD is known for looking for technologists who have a great deal of discipline and have well organized and able to execute teams in terms of what they're looking for in partnering to build these technologies for the warfighter. And Jim is going to cover all of the ins and outs. He really is the expert. We're just delighted to have him here today. And it is long, but he'll explain our breaks and how we're going to do this. And also wanted to especially thank Kimberly and introduce her, because she is our partner. Arkansas Apex Accelerator is our partner today. Neither one of us prepared slides, but we're consultants supporting your work, and Jim is a consultant who can also support your work, and we're going to talk to you about how we sort of form those teams for support as we get through today's material. But I wanted to introduce Kimberly first and have her tell you a little bit about Apex.
Good morning, everyone. And also, I'm so pleased to extend our welcome to you all as well. So I am a procurement counselor with the Arkansas Apex Accelerator. And as I conduct my activities on a day-to-day basis, I find that people are like, wow, what is that? And this is a really special opportunity because we are actually funded by the Department of Defense. We fall under the Office of Small Business Programs at DoD. And we are part of a national network of over 90 Apex accelerators around the country that serve our businesses around the nation and help them to compete for local, state, and federal government contracts. So we are your specialists on all things government contracting. In Arkansas, we are housed within the University of Arkansas Systems Division of Agriculture, so that our services are readily accessible to Arkansas businesses located throughout the state. And we also provide our services at no cost ever to anyone. So that's a great resource available to you as you go on this journey. And as Karen said, we are in it for the long haul. We are involved with you particularly as you pursue innovation awards by helping you to register with the System for Award Management, or SAM, where everyone gets paid by the government and also has to be registered for your business to compete for a federal government contract, and also other registrations that might be required with the SBIR process, such as grants.gov and SBIR.gov, and other registrations you will need in pursuing those opportunities. So I just wanted to introduce our services. We provide our services both virtually and in person. And we provide a whole variety of trainings and other activities to help to support you in government contracting. So thank you again, Karen. Thank you, Jim. I'm really looking forward to today's material, and my contact information is available to you throughout the program, and we'll look forward to communicating at a later time. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kimberly. So I do want to introduce our esteemed presenter today. Jim Greenwood and his wife Gail have run their consulting group supporting SBIR STTR applicants for many years. And as I mentioned earlier, Jim is kind of the guru on all things Department of Defense, and is going to kind of take us through this journey. We again welcome your questions as we go along, and then we'll sort of collect those and make sure that we get all of your questions answered along the way. And at the end of our presentation today, I will revisit Arkansas-based companies. We're making an offer to Arkansas-based companies because my grant funds me to be able to work with Arkansas companies, and we will be offering you the opportunity to explore this topic further, and also potentially support you in an application if you are ready. So we're going to talk about what all is involved in helping prepare you, and all the ins and outs of working with the federal government this way. So I guess, Jim, without further ado, and if there's anything else you would like to say about yourself and your experience, I'm happy to turn it over, and just let us know what we can do to support you. So,
all right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Karen, and welcome everyone this morning for our webinar on the Department of Defense's SBIR STTR program. When she uses terms like esteemed and guru, what she's really trying to say is Jim is really old. I mean, he's been around just forever. And literally, I've been involved in the SBIR program since the program began in 1983. Actually, as an applicant, I was right out of grad school and had joined a engineering consulting firm, and boss came back from some sort of conference and said, there's something called SBIR, and I think we ought to be in it. And of course, wanting to impress the boss, I volunteered to write an SBIR proposal to, it was actually the Department of Transportation. Did just pretty much everything wrong from what I would tell you to do today, but it was my first introduction. Long story short, my career morphed into economic and business development after that, and found myself first kind of being a cheerleader for SBIR STTR, and later developing training actually for the federal laboratory. Sandia National Labs asked us to develop some training. So we did training for them, and that was done then around the country to 48 different states. And then we got more and more demand for just one-on-one assistance, and we still provide a lot of training like we're doing today, as well as the one-on-one assistance to folks. I pride myself in taking things that are complicated and making them simple. I really enjoy doing that, and I have tried to do that with today's materials for DoD's SBIR STTR program. And I will tell you, it's not been a complete success. And that is not because I don't have experience or I'm not good at it. It is because the military's SBIR STTR programs are that difficult and that convoluted, which is very unfortunate when they're supposed to make them simple for small companies to participate in. But just want to set the stage ahead of time as we talk about some of this material, and you're scratching your head going, man, how am I supposed to know that? Or how could I have done that? Or that looks like a lot of work. It is, because it is a complicated system. It is much more complicated, in my opinion, than it should be and that it needs to be. Fortunately, there's new leadership at DoD's SBIR program who I hope will make this a little easier for all of us to participate in. But she just got on board and she's got a lot of irons in the fire, so that may take a little while to get going. A couple of logistical things. Very important text box down there in gold, lower right corner. I'm not going to sit here and talk for 3.5 hours. Instead, I'm going to talk for about 50 minutes, 50 minutes. And then we're going to break and take 10 minutes where you can get up and do whatever you need to do for 10 minutes. Then we'll come back and do another 50 minutes and then again break for 10 minutes. And this has become something we've done for a number of webinars, and it seems to be a good compromise of covering a lot of material, but also not getting the risk of brain deadness setting in when we overdo it. So that will be kind of our format, and I've already got my my little timer rolling over here, so we should be see if I can get it. See if my smartphone will talk to me here. There we go. Other things, again, I'll echo again what Meredith and Karen said. Please ask questions. There's a lot of material here, but there are also a lot of questions that undoubtedly will come up. Pop them into the Q&A function or alternatively the chat function, and Meredith and Karen will be monitoring those and periodically asking them on your behalf. I'm going to go ahead and drop my video at this point because I'm coming to you from the mountains of North Carolina, the Asheville area. And I know from experience, our internet service is not so great that that I can afford to devote bandwidth to you having a little picture of me. So let me take down the video. All right, and I'll remind you what I look like when we do Q&A. Okay, I'll bring it back up at that time. Last quick comment, you've heard briefly from the ASB TDC as well as the Apex Accelerator. These are two excellent resources that you need to be tapping into if you're going to pursue SBIR STTR. Karen will talk later about your accessibility to Phase 0 program to help you give you some support as you prepare your proposal, as well as the opportunity to have a 25-minute session between you and me on a future date where we can talk about your SBIR interests and do a little brainstorming. And Kimberly, God bless her, she deals with the bureaucratic side of DoD. So when she talks about SAM, if you haven't met SAM yet, you're going to be in for quite a shock there. That is something you have to register on to be participating in SBIR STTR. And like so many things, it shouldn't be that difficult, but it's there's a lot to it. There's a lot of questions that maybe you're not prepared for. There's delays in getting your registration in place and so on. And one of the things the Apex accelerators are great at is helping you with those registrations. So keep both of those resources in mind as you move forward with your SBIR pursuits. Let's get going. Let's talk SBIR STTR here. Now, first, before we jump into the Department of Defense specific programs, just want to bring everybody up to a common level because I can recognize that some of you are new to SBIR STTR. So let's talk for a minute about what these programs are about before we jump into the specifics of DoD's version of them. SBIR stands for Small Business Innovation Research, and this program provides non-recourse contracts and grants to small U.S.-owned companies for the purpose of developing new products and services, with those services or products being based on innovative, unproven concepts and technologies. Now, some key points here. Non-recourse means you don't repay the money, you don't give up equity for SBIR money. So 2 reasons you ought to like SBIR. You don't have to repay the money, and you don't give up any equity for it. Some of the awards are contracts, some are grants. Now, all of them at the military are going to be contracts, but as you're going to see in a little bit, there's a big difference between a contract and a grant. And one thing I'll caution you about is if you saunter up to one of the DoD SBIR people and ask them about their SBIR grants program, there's a real good possibility they're going to kick you in the shins, because they are very clear at the military that their SBIR program is contracts. It is not grants. And you go, what's the big deal? It's money. Who cares? It is important to some folks, and I'll show you the difference between contracts and grants here in a little bit. You got to be a small U.S. owned company. Small, simple definition, thank goodness. 500 or fewer employees is the definition of small. So 500 or fewer employees, doesn't matter full-time, part-time, just number of heads that are employed by your company. If there are fewer than 500 or fewer, then you are eligible for SBIR. U.S. owned means simple majority ownership, 51% or more ownership by U.S. citizens and or permanent resident aliens. So it's not that you can't have foreign ownership. It just has to be a minority, 49% or less foreign ownership. Now, there's obviously sensitivities if that foreign ownership is someone from, let's just say, North Korea, Iran, or mainland China. And I think you know why that would be sensitivity. We'll talk more about the elevated sensitivity for those of you that might have ties with Chinese companies, government, or individuals. We'll talk more about that a little bit later in the webinar. Purpose of SBIR is to develop products and services. Now, you might be scratching your head going, Greenwood, what have you been smoking, guy? It's a research program. It's right there in the name, Small Business Innovation Research. It's not about products and services, it's about research. Well, I would submit that you are confusing the ends and the means of SBIR. You are correct. The means of SBIR is research. You will be doing research with this funding. But the means or the desired endpoint of a successful SBIR project is you take the results of that research and you productize it. You do something quote unquote useful with it. So you don't do research for research's sake. You don't do it for the benefit of presenting a paper, writing a article, putting it on your resume. That's not what you do with SBIR. SBIR, you put in the hands of a customer. And at the military, that customer a lot of times is going to be the warfighter or someone who supports the warfighter. So you got to have a mindset here from the beginning, guys, of SBIR. What are we going to productize? What are we going to turn into a product or service that benefits the warfighter or those who support the warfighter? And finally, you need to be looking for ideas that are both innovative and unproven. Now, innovative, again, it's right there in the name of the program, Small Business Innovation Research. Innovative, unfortunately, does not have a commonly held definition across the agencies that participate in SBIR, but think of it as something new, different. Some people like the term novel. It makes me kind of ill, but I hear people like the term novel to express that it's innovative. Creative, outside the box, hasn't been tried before, or somebody tried it and it didn't work, but you think you've got a solution to why it didn't work for them. It's got to be risky. It's got to be something that is, again, so different from what others have done or even tried that there's a real possibility that it's going to fail. And that takes us to the unproven part of SBIR. You need to propose something that you don't know whether it's going to work or not. Now, that might sound really strange, but that is one reason why SBIR was created. It was for those ideas that are so outside the box, so different, that they may fail. They might just not solve the problem. They might just not work. And the notion was, boy, if you know it's going to work, you can get that funded by anybody. Now, again, it's the notion, it's the theory, right? It's not necessarily true, but that's the notion. The reality is with SBIR, they want projects that the VCs and the banks and the angels won't fund because of the technical risk involved. So got to have an idea that's both innovative and unproven. Okay, great. That's SBIR. Then what's STTR? Well, we could spend the entire webinar just talking about these differences, but let me wrap it into one major difference between SBIR and STTR. And by the way, they're very similar in many respects in terms of the innovation, the unprovenness, primarily US owned and so on. But here's a key difference. With an SBIR project, you are allowed to subcontract some of the funding to another entity, including, let's just say, the University of Arkansas. You're allowed, it's permitted, you can do it. STTR, it's required. So SBIR allows you to subcontract to others, including universities. STTR requires that you subcontract, and that requirement is extended to a nonprofit research entity. And I would say 90% of the time that's a university, probably 7 or 8% of the time it's a federal lab, and the other 2 or 3% is going to be other standalone nonprofits. But you have to subcontract at least 30% of the project to one of those nonprofits in an STTR. I get people all the time that say, oh, well, we're going to team with University of Arkansas, so we have to do STTR. Dead wrong. Look at the definition, guys. If you're going to team with the University of Arkansas, you could do either SBIR or STTR. So teaming with the university does not preclude you from doing SBIR. It just opens the door, if you will, for both SBIR as well as STTR. Another eligibility criterion that folks will have an issue with have some heartburn on this is that you will have to have someone that upon award of the SBIR STTR project is quote unquote primarily employed by your business, by the small business that's applying for the SBIR award and STTR award. Primary employment will mean they cannot work, this individual cannot work for more than 49% of their time anywhere else during the course of the SBIR STTR project. So they've got to be working at least 51% of their time with the small business. By the way, that 51% does not have to be on the SBIR STTR project, but it has to be in the employment of the small business. So you could be working on the SBIR, say 20% of the time, and another project 20% of the time, and 10% of the time you're working on general corporate functions, for example. This individual will be your principal investigator, your PI, and they must meet the technical qualifications of a PI, meaning they've got to be qualified to run this SBIR STTR project. So you can't just designate your clerical support person as your PI unless they've got an incredibly impressive resume in terms of both education and experience. Having problems with this, not sure who this is going to be, join the club. This is an issue that a lot of small companies have to grapple with. Who's going to meet this requirement? Very important, though, a couple things. One is this is at the time of award, not necessarily at the time you're sending in the proposal. So if you are primarily employed somewhere else right now, and you don't meet this requirement, but upon award of the SBIR project, you would then join the small business at least 51% of your time, then you could be designated as the PI. Other note is on STTRs, and this is another SBIR STTR difference. On STTRs, this principal investigator could be primarily employed at that nonprofit partner, the university or the federal laboratory that we talked about. That is true in 5 of the 6 STTR agencies. As we show down here under the first note, it is not true at the National Science Foundation. SBIR STTR are conveniently organized into 3 phases. Primarily so the politicians can kind of understand what we're doing here. Phase 1 is where 99% of the time you're going to get started with your SBIR STTR project. You're going to have an innovative idea. You don't know whether it's going to work, right? We talked about that. It has to be unproven. Phase one is a little bit of time and a little bit of money for you to prove that it works, prove its technical, and here's the jargon in SBIR, the technical feasibility of your idea. For phase one, you can get anywhere literally from about 50 to 275K, depending on the component of the military. And as I say, I think the average these days is probably around 225K. And it's for a project that will last somewhere between 2 and 12 months. So we're not talking about a lot of time. We're not talking about a lot of money. And therefore, you need to be careful that you don't over propose the phase one. Very common mistake. You try to do too much with the amount of money and the amount of time that you got. Some of you in phase one will prove your idea is infeasible. It does not work or doesn't work better than competing solutions. That is not a failure in SBIR STTR. That is what these programs are supposed to do, is kind of ferret out those ideas innovative ideas that work from those innovative ideas that don't work. And if yours doesn't work, no skin off your nose, no black mark on your reputation, but your SBIR STTR project will end at the conclusion of the phase one. So hopefully that doesn't happen to you. Hopefully your idea does prove feasible, does work technically, does solve the problem. You then apply for and hopefully receive a phase two. Phase two is now a lot more money. Notice we can now be into the millions of dollars, a lot more time. We can measure it now in, say, a year and a half to 2 years to really roll up your sleeves and do the R&D to develop your innovation. So a lot of phase two is what you wish you could have done in phase one, but didn't have the money and time to do. It's sometimes referred to as the prototyping phase, but don't feel that that's a hard and fast definition of phase two. Phase three then is because of this goal of commercializing and productizing the results of your SBIR STTR project, they have defined a phase three as the commercialization phase. But there are no SBIR funds available for phase three. We then have to turn to those sources we were talking about a while ago, the venture capitalists, the angel investors, maybe banks, or, and this is true in the case of Department of Defense, they may put in non-SBIR STTR DoD money into your project at phase three. All right. Note number one down there, 99% of the time you're going to enter the program, as I said, through phase one, but that 1% of the time you would enter at phase two, and you would do that because you'd already done the equivalent of phase one on your own time and resources or other resources. And you'd also skip phase one and go to phase two if you were one of 3 agencies that allow you to do that. See, Congress has said all SBIR STTR agencies have to start you at phase one, except for the military, DoD, NIH, which is National Institutes of Health, and Department of Education. And for those 3 agencies, Congress has said the agencies are allowed to accept project proposals for phase two where there wasn't a previous SBIR STTR phase one. So since we're emphasizing DoD today, keep that in mind. There's a direct phase two, which I abbreviate, as you see in the text box down there, DTP2, is available at the military on some topics, not every topic, but on some topics. Probably have some faculty members joining us today. How can you participate in these programs? One is, if it's an STTR, we have to have a university subcontractor. If it's SBIR, we might have one. Somebody's got to be the lead on the university subcontract. That could be you, faculty member. Or faculty member, perhaps your university allows you to consult in your spare time. Well, you could be a consultant then on an SBIR STTR, not a member or representing the university, but as yourself. Or third, literally, you can own a small business and apply for SBIR STTR. And in some cases, I see this actually a fair amount, The owner, faculty member that owns the small business then applies for SBIR STTR and actually subcontracts part of the project back to their own university. That is allowed. That's acceptable. And it sounds cozy. It is, but it's allowed. Now, a couple of important notes down at the bottom of the slide here. One is, I've just told you what the federal government and the SBIR STTR agencies allow. I have not told you what your university allows. And obviously, very important that you have to know what your university rules are about what role you might play on an SBIR STTR. So you got to find that out. Second note, also very important. Let's say that you, faculty member, start a small business, you apply for STTR and subcontract back to your own university. You get the award. You, faculty member, can only represent on the STTR project the small business or the university, not both. So you can do research as a member of the small business or research as part of the university, but you cannot do both. So you'd have to make that that decision. Now you own the small business, faculty member, you decide you're going to represent your small business when doing the research on the project, then you need to have someone else at the university designated as the individual who's going to lead their effort. But if you, faculty member, own the small business, you decide you want to represent your university on the subcontract, then you need to hire someone, and again, this could be subject to award of the SBIR STTR project, who will be primarily employed by your small business and will represent the small business in doing research on the SBIR STTR project. So a lot of opportunities for faculty members, but again, make sure that you're only wearing one hat and you are also complying with your university requirements there. Told you earlier, some agencies give you your award as a contract, some give it to you as a grant. Here's, and again, we could spend the whole webinar talking about this, but key difference, contract agencies have a mission. They are having some issue or problem accomplishing that mission, and they come to you through their SBIR STTR program saying, here's the problem, can you solve it? And your job is to respond with an innovative solution to the problem that they have specified that they are having in accomplishing their mission. That is how the military uses SBIR STTR. It's problem solving. They tell you the problem, you solve it with an innovative solution, okay? And Susan's quote there, I think, puts it well. Focus on what we asked for, not what you think we need. So here's the problem, solve the problem. If you don't want to solve our problem, then go away. Don't bug us at the DoD SBIR program. That's a contract agency, very typical. How does that contrast with a grant agency? Oh, I'm a grant agency. I've got money for good ideas. Do you have any? And you're scratching your head going, well, gee, could you give me a little more guidance? Oh yeah, we're the National Institutes of Health. We fund good ideas related to human health and medicine. Do you have any? Now, you see the difference between contract and grant? Yeah, the military is saying, here's the problem, solve it. The grant agency is saying, got any good ideas we could fund? And this is why when you approach somebody at DoD and you ask them about their SBIR grant program, they get upset because they're thinking SBIR is helping them meet the needs of the warfighter, solving the problems that the warfighter is having. And you're coming up and saying, do you have some money I could have? Because I have some really fun things that I would like to pursue that maybe you at the military might benefit from. It's not the mindset of the military grant type projects. Now, having said that, we're going to talk about open topics here a little bit later, and that's a little bit of a change in how the military looks at SBIR STTR. But again, this is, I would say 97% of the time, the military is going to come to you and say, here's the problem, can you solve it? And if you got a solution, great. If you don't grasp the problem, you don't have a solution to the problem, don't bug them with a proposal. So who are the contract agencies? Who are the grant agencies? Well, we'll start with The pie chart on the left saying, you know, who are the big players in SBIR STTR? Well, from the pie, I think it's pretty obvious who the 800-pound gorilla is in the SBIR STTR room. It is the military. Our focus today is the military, and they represent more than half of the SBIR STTR program just by themselves. There are 11 SBIR agencies, 6 STTR agencies, but the military by itself is more than half of the entire program. Now, if you want to know who's contract versus grant, take a look at the table on the right side. If it's shaded in yellow, that means it's a grant agency. If it's not shaded, then it will be in just the white, unshaded, and that would be a contract agency. So as you can see, there's our military. It's contract, so it's not shaded. And again, you can see the magnitude of their budget, and just compare, you know, DoD almost $2 billion for FY23 versus the second place of NIH, Department of Health Human Services, at less than half of that. So the military is really the dominant agency when it comes to SBIR STTR. And again, notice only the biggest the biggest 6 agencies have STTR programs as well as SBIR programs. That's because the legislation for STTR restricted it to only the larger agencies in terms of their R&D budgets, larger measured by R&D. Yes, okay. So when do the agencies want their proposal? Any time of the year, somebody's requesting a proposal among these 11 agencies. Now, again, we're focused on the military. So right now, DoD is requesting proposals from you in their, what they call their 24.3, which designates the fiscal year 2024, and 0.3 designates it as the third solicitation of this fiscal year. So it came out 21st of August, and your proposal is due here in about, about 5-6 weeks from now, more specifically October 16th. I've also given you the dates for the first 2 solicitations in the next fiscal year. Remember, the federal fiscal year starts October 1. So the first one after that start of the fiscal year, 25.1, the proposal, let's try again, the solicitation or BA will come out early December with a February due date. So again, there's one solicitation, or as the military calls it, BAA, broad agency announcement, out right now, came out on August 21st, due date of October 16th. But per the text box upper right corner, more and more DoD is doing these what are called out of cycle topics. And we're going to talk a lot more about that because that's kind of the big deal at the military right now. And you can see all the other dates for other agencies, but again, we're focused on the military, so we'll take a look at similar slide, but for STTR. And again, I've shown you the FY24. Now notice, and this is, I'll cover this again later, but to introduce you to this, if it's, when the military designates a solicitation as point A, point B, point C, when they're using a letter, then that indicates it's an STTR versus, remember when we did SBIR, it's point 1, point 2, point 3. So this is an important difference that you need to recognize, because a lot of times you'll run across a DoD topic, and DoD has topics that are SBIR topics, but they're different from those that are STTR topics. So let's say you find a topic that just looks great for what you want to do. One of the first questions you want to ask yourself is, is this an SBIR topic or an STTR topic? And this is the first indication of that, is if it's point 1, point 2, point 3, then it's SBIR. If it's point A, point B, or point C, then it's STTR. You go, man, that's confusing. Well, welcome to the military. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Wait till we get going here. But you can see the due dates for The release dates and the due dates for your proposals, they're identical for STTR as SBIR, but again, entirely different topics and even a different solicitation or BAA that you're looking at for instructions and guidance, SBIR versus STTR. One other thing about SBIR STTR I wanted to mention before we jump into the DoD specifics is SBIR STTR, even though they've been around for 40 plus years, they are still quote unquote temporary programs. And temporary means that they could actually evaporate at any point if Congress does not take action. And I know that's a scary thought that we have to wait for Congress to take action. But if Congress doesn't take action, these programs will expire and go away. Last time we faced that was the end of September of 2022, the end of the federal fiscal year of 2022. And literally these programs were set to expire on the 30th of September. And literally Biden signed the reauthorization on the 30th of September. So we were that close to these programs being history. The reauthorization only extended SBIR STTR for 3 years. Most reauthorizations are 5, 6, 7 years. This one was a measly 3 years, which means we're already, we're down to about a year before this exercise has to be repeated, which we could talk about that. That's always a scary prospect dealing with Congress on that. One thing, and I'll talk more about it later. I've already kind of mentioned it, but we'll talk more detail about it later. This is where Congress stepped in during this reauthorization and said, DoD, every one of your components that participates in SBIR must designate at least one open topic per year. Now, unfortunately, they didn't really define open topic, but I'll show you what the various components are doing in this regard when we get a little bit more of the background under our belt here. Two other things, and these are old reauthorizations, but a lot of times when the programs get reauthorized, there's some sort of change that Congress makes, sometimes better, sometimes not so good. One was they allowed the individual agencies that participate in SBIR to decide whether they wanted to allow small businesses that are majority owned by venture capitalists, hedge funds, private equity funds, to participate in SBIR. This had been debated for many, many years, whether companies that are majority owned by VCs should be allowed to do that. Finally, in this reauthorization, Congress said, agencies, if you want to do that, you're allowed to do that. You don't have to, but you're allowed. DoD has not, as an agency, allowed majority owned companies majority owned by VCs to participate in their SBIR program, but you'll see it on special topics. You'll see it, a particular component will allow it. And very important, that last sub-bullet there, this is not affecting STTR. This is only an SBIR situation. And number 3 is also something that continues to raise its ugly head all these years later. Congress had decided erroneously, in my opinion, that a lot of SBIR STTR companies were being free and easy with the rules, with the law, and so they cracked down on what they called fraud, waste, and abuse. And even to this day, you will see an emphasis on fraud, waste, and abuse. You're looking at for example, the cover page for an agency's SBIR program, and there's a 1-800 number to report fraud, waste, and abuse. And you're wondering why that's there on the cover page? That's why, because it was made a big deal in this reauthorization. All right, so with those kind of basics about SBIR STTR under the belt, let's talk DoD. I've already told you this. It's by far the largest single SBIR STTR agency, and that makes it a more attractive target for you, because it means even though they're problem solving and they've got these very specific topics, they're putting out hundreds of them a year. So when there's hundreds of topics, there may very well be one that aligns with your interests. Most of these topics are focused on a specific problem, but because of the open topic that is now mandated by Congress, there's a few percentage of those topics that are broader than that. Again, we're going to talk more about that. This is something that folks, I think, underestimate the value of this. When you do an SBIR STTR for, let's say, Army, they are telling you, we Army have the following problem. Can you solve this problem for us, the Army? And you in phase 1 and phase 2 solve their problem. Well, guess who wants to be your customer in phase 3? Army. It was their problem. You solved their problem. They need your solution. They're a customer. So a beauty of DoD's SBIR STTR program is you start working with a potential customer in phase 1, continue to work with them in phase 2. And if you have done a good job and they like you, they then continue to buy from you in phase 3. So you get a long-term revenue stream. I said this earlier, and again, don't underestimate the importance of this. SBIR STTR funding will get you a ways down the road, but may not get you as far as you need to go to finish the R&D and productize. DoD has non-SBIR funding that they can put in to fill that gap. And, I've been saying some things to make you salivate here. I just have to put a little bit of a wet blanket on to tell you there are many different components participating in SBIR STTR, and each does this differently. So who does participate? Well, interestingly, and this is kind of sad it's funny in a sad sort of way. The military can't agree how many components there are. Some folks in the military will tell you there are 12 components, some say 13, but this is the list that I will use because it's a cute graphic from DoD. And it's some of the usual suspects, right? Army, Navy, Air Force, right? You're aware of those. But then there are some you may have never even heard of. Defense Microelectronics Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, Defense Logistics Agency. Now, Kimberly, her ears perked up because DLA is one that the Apex Accelerator does a lot of work with in the military. Notice I've designated 3 of these as new, and you go, Greenwood, the Air Force isn't new. What are you doing? Well, the Department of Air Force is new. See, prior to, I don't know, it's been maybe 3 or 4 years ago, it was the U.S. Air Force, USAF. Then it got elevated to department status. And the Department of Air Force now is subdivided into USAF, U.S. Air Force, and USSF, U.S. Space Force. Defense Health Agency is new, and that has not gone over real well with some of the departments and other components because DHA has taken money and responsibility and power, if you will, from other components and consolidated into their wing when it comes to health-related issues, whether it's running a military hospital or doing research on health-related issues with the warfighter. And then notice down below, Space Development Agency. Wow. Okay. So an obvious question would be, what's the difference, Greenwood, between the Space Development Agency and the USSF, the U.S. Space Force? And my answer would be, I have no idea. They're both under the military, and presumably they have different responsibilities, but I don't know. I literally don't. I do know that you're seeing the military's concern that space is going to be a new frontier for defense, for military, for aggression, for terrorism, whatever you want to label it as, and therefore they're putting resources in place to deal with that issue. Why they've got 2 separate ones, can't tell you. Just wanted to point to a couple of things on this slide. This is FY22, so a couple of years back, but interesting, even though STTR is only like 15% of the size of SBIR. Interesting that STTR is a bigger slice of the overall pie than you would expect. And I can't tell you why that is, but in case you're wondering, gee, should I participate in DoD STTR? This would suggest that they're very, it's something there's a lot of awards being made and a lot of funding going into. And down below, if you are not careful, you'll misinterpret what they're saying. They're trying to tell you how many awards are made by these various components. And you see that and you go, wow, so the Air Force is by far the largest of the components of the military when it comes to SBIR STTR. That is an incorrect conclusion. Now, Air Force is, I think it's the largest single department or component in the DoD's SBIR program. But the reason why they are making so many awards is Air Force has something called AFWERX. You'll hear more about that later. AFWERX has a mindset of funding a whole bunch of really small phase ones. And by small, I'm talking $50,000 to $75,000 phase ones. And they'll fund 350 of them at a time. That's what drives these numbers so crazy like this. So if you look at Air Force in terms of their overall budget for SBIR STTR, it's modestly, it's going to be in the magnitude of Navy and Army, let's put it that way. A little graphic to kind of orient you in terms of what the military's got in the way of solicitations or BAAs, and these are the documents that request proposals. You and I would call it an RFP, request for proposal. The military never calls it an RFP. They call it a solicitation, or they call it a BAA, broad agency announcement is what BAA stands for. There are three flavors of these BAAs or solicitations at DoD. They're got the ones I call the regular ones, you got the one that's called the annual, and then for lack of a better word, I call it other. And in each of these categories, the regular, and you're already seeing where I'm going with this, you got 3 per year. You got 3 regular solicitations per year. The annual, per the term annual, means you get 1 of these per year. And other, AFWERX, this little skunkworks, interesting group within the Air Force, does its own thing and puts out its own solicitation, aside from any other agency, and even aside from the rest of Air Force's SBIR STTR program. And then you get down to the nitty gritty, and what you've got are the, right now, we've got in the regular solicitations, we've got 24.3, meaning the third solicitation of FY24 for SBIR, and 24.C, so it's the third solicitation in FY24 for STTR. Then you've got the annual solicitation, and the way you designate or know that it's the annual solicitation is it's 0.4. So in the case of federal fiscal year 24, it's 24.4. If it's SBIR, point D, as in dog, if it's the STTR, annual solicitation. So those two are available to you. And coming out soon, more specifically on September 11th, is the date that they have designated, you will have the AFWERX coming out with their X, and the designation, if it's AFWERX, the number will not just be 24.7, it's X 24.7 for the SBIR program, and X 24.E for the STTR program. Now, again, are you getting a headache with all the complications here? Again, I'm trying to simplify this as best I can, but it's a complicated system, just figuring out where the, what solicitation should I be looking for? Where are these things? And you got to realize there are multiple ones out there that you want to be looking for. You want to be looking at the regular solicitation, 24.3, 24.C, as well as the annual solicitation, as well as you may very well want to be looking at the AFWERX solicitation. So what the heck is going on with the military? How come, Greenwood, you've said they're difficult, they're complicated. What's going on? Why are they doing this? Well, there are several reasons for this. First of all, there's an emergence of a new mindset at many of the components. There is unfortunately, there's a pride in just doing things differently at some of the components. There's some reorganization that has occurred within the greater DoD community that has affected SBIR STTR unexpectedly. And then you've also got a situation where there's some new support, a new support contractor. And finally, this congressional mandate for this open topic. So let's look at each of these 5 things that are occurring at DoD in a little bit more detail. What's this mindset? Well, the mindset change at DoD has been, we at the military cannot do SBIR STTR the way we have done them for decades. And for decades, what they did were these 3 solicitations per year, and all the components participated, and they all put topics in them, and they all waited 60 days for you to respond, and then they took 6 months to select a winner, and then they negotiated for another 6 months, and it just took too much time. And the components feel that the warfighter is not being served adequately the way the old program worked. So that's one reason why this annual solicitation, what we're going to talk more about, has come out, and also the reason why AFWERX kind of popped up. So what is this out-of-cycle solicitation? What does this refer to? Well, DARPA started this. DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And DARPA says, and I won't read the quote to you, but basically what I'm just saying, outdated requirements are not keeping pace with today's rapidly changing technologies, provide capabilities to our warfighter. We must have the tools to operate at the pace of innovation. And they're concerned about innovation, how quickly we can innovate, but they're also worried how quickly the adversary is innovating. And can we keep up and preferably keep ahead of them? They feel the regular or general solicitations are just too slow, basically. Here's the detail on why that is, but bottom line is it could be easily a year from the time a warfighter says, here's a problem I need solved, a year from that until you just start working on solving the problem. And in the meantime, the warfighter is trying to keep from getting shot or captured or whatever the issue is, waiting for you to get going. And DARPA says we just, the warfighter can't do that. We can't wait that kind of time frame. So DARPA comes out with this once a year solicitation. They call it the out of cycle solicitation. They say, here's a solicitation which will provide the legal background, all the requirements we have to publish, as well as the instructions for upcoming proposals. And then they put out they called them SBOs, small business opportunities. And just sporadically, DARPA would say, okay, here's a topic. We need proposals in the next 45 days. And then they would select winners in the next 30 days, and they'd have them under contract another 15 days. So what was taking a year was now knocked down to maybe 4 months time frame, which you and me in small business, 4 months, it's forever, right? Military, federal government, 4 months, my God, moving at the speed of sound, right? So DARPA's doing this, and it's working for them. Advantages, by putting out the one solicitation per year that covers all of the legal requirements and the instructions. They pop out a topic whenever they've got it assembled and ready to go, and they can lessen all these time frames to get the project underway and completed in a more timely basis. So other agencies see what DARPA's doing, and they say, we like what DARPA's doing. So Space Development Agency, Army, Defense Health, all said, we like what DARPA's doing. We're going to release our out-of-cycle solicitation and start doing the same thing. So now you got you got 3 per year regular solicitations. Now you got 4 different out-of-cycle solicitations by 4 different components. And what DoD, and I have a lot of criticism for DoD's SBIR office, the one over all of these components, but one thing they did right was when they saw all of the components starting out of cycle solicitations, they said, this isn't good. Stop doing it, guys. We will issue a single out of cycle solicitation that covers all the components, all 12 or 13 components of the military that has SBIR STTR programs. And that's where we came up with where they came up with the annual solicitation. It's no longer called out of cycle. It's now called annual solicitation, suggesting that it's put out at the first of the annual fiscal year. And it's designated again as point 4 if it's the SBIR annual solicitation, point D if it's the STTR annual solicitation. And of course, then starting first of the new fiscal year, first of next month, expect them to release a 25.4 and a 25.D for the next fiscal year annual solicitations. This is what that annual solicitation looks like. Now, again, this can be very confusing, but notice the text box there on the right side. It's an annual solicitation, so it sounds like it comes out at the first of the fiscal year and then it sits there, right? And every agency uses, every component uses it. Well, no, they put it out the first of the year, then they periodically update it. And the latest update was literally within the past couple of days. So we have an update right on our laps right now. Unfortunately, they don't seem to tell you when they update it. But remember, if you're submitting under this 24.4 annual solicitation, you periodically want to go in and see if there's an update. Look for that date in the upper right corner and see if you got the latest one or not. All right, and then one of the things you find, and this is buried 2/3 of the way in the back of this document, is a list of topics, annual topics. And as you can see, a lot of topics are being released under this annual solicitation. And notice that a lot of them are Army. Army has really jumped on this annual solicitation as the way to get their topics out. Navy's doing a few. Air Force just put out a whole slew a couple of days ago, as you can see down there under their release. And then a few of the other components put out occasionally. So you got that defense microelectronics component, chem bio, defense health are all shown as also putting out occasional topics. Notice also that first column component release number. Very important that you notice release number. We'll come back to that when we talk more about doing your proposal, but that release is where you find the instructions for these annual topics. I find a lot of clients don't realize that and they get the wrong set of instructions from the wrong place, and they can write a whole proposal based on the wrong instructions. And obviously, we don't want that happening to you guys. All right, before we jump into before we jump into this other slide, let me go ahead and suggest we take our first break. And I apologize, I ran over a few minutes there since I got a late start. Let's go ahead and take our 10-minute break. I am showing 10:05 Central Time. So please come back at 10:15 Central Time. And at 10:15, I will ask Meredith if we have any questions that we want to address, and then we'll jump back into the material. So please come back at 10:15 Central Time. Well, I did get a suggestion during break, and a very important and useful one, and really well timed, because they said, well, you know, where is this website, the military website that for the SBIR STTR program? And this slide actually shows you the top arrow here is www.dodsbirstttr.mil, and that is where you're going to this is where you're going to, there are actually two different DoD SBIR websites, and I'll show you both of them. But 95% of the time you're going to use this one. The other one doesn't get used much at all. So you want to get used to that www.DoDSBIRSTTR.mil. And it is kind of this ugly orange ribbon across the top, and it doesn't look terribly highfalutin, and it isn't. It's pretty mediocre is the term I use with this website all the time, but it's the one you got to use not only for submission of your proposal, and that's where the DSIP name comes from, Defense SBIR STTR Innovation Portal meaning this is where you submit your proposal, but it's also where you're going to see the topics, link to the topics, and a lot of times where you're going to link to the individual BAAs or solicitations. So we're going to see this website a lot, and you're going to use it a lot in your SBIR pursuits if you're going to do DoD. So let's start with using it for purposes of taking a look at the topics here. So again, if you went to the DoDSBIRSTTR.mil website and do and this is under the middle tab there, solicitation info, you pull that down, it'll have topics and topics Q&A, and you can request that it show you all the topics in a particular solicitation, or as you see, there's a search engine there, there's a filtering that you can only have those that are open or those that have missile in it, or whatever the terminology might be. In this case, I said, show me the topics in the SBIR 2024.4, which, as you now know, is the annual solicitation. And it lists, at that time, there were 27 different topics in the annual solicitation there. If you want to see the full solicitation, by the way, you click on right below the top arrow where it says home, just click on that and it takes you to a screen, and you can, it'll have boxes there for all of the open solicitations. So right now you would see there's a 24.3, 24.C, 24.4, and 24.D are all out there. And here in a couple of weeks, you'd also see the X 24.7 and 24.E for the AFWERX solicitations. I'll keep my fingers crossed on that, by the way. You would hope to see all those things there, but this website is not that good. And sometimes they are not right on top of it. And maybe I'm being a little too coy there in how I put that, but they do a mediocre job. Mediocre is the word I use with this website a lot. All right, let's keep. Now, here's something new that's going to happen, and this is, there's some hope in this. And you look at this, and you go, my God, what are they doing here? What they're doing is the DoD SBIR office, which has responsibility over all of the DoD offices of the 12 or 13 DoD components that have SBIR programs. The DoD SBIR office has new leadership, and the new leadership has said, we have heard the criticism that this has gotten too confusing, too complicated, and so we're taking this initiative to make it less complicated. So what they're going to do, starting in October, actually 2nd of October per this chart here, on the 2nd of October, DoD will say, okay, here are all of the annual topics for the next 30 days. And so you will see those topics. And then on November 6th, they'll put out all the annual solicitations for those 30 days. And then December 4th, all those topics for the next 30 days. So their opinion is we can make this simpler if you're only seeing these annual topics coming out once a month. Now, I'm not seeing that as a big part of the problem. And maybe what I should be doing is looking at the glass half full here and saying, well, at least they're doing something, and at least they're They're starting to address the complexity and the confusion, but this doesn't seem like a big step in the right direction, in my opinion. I've heard few people complain about when the topics come out being the issue, but I just want you to be aware of this, that again, on October 2nd, you will see a slew of annual topics released at that time, and proposals will be due on November 20th, and then on November 6th, again, a whole slew of topics. Just want you to be aware of that. That's a new initiative on the part of the DoD SBIR office. And again, I applaud them for trying to make this less confusing. I'm just not sure this is a high priority in terms of the problem. Let's put it that way. Let's talk for a minute about AFWERX. AFWERX is a very popular part of the SBIR STTR program at the military. This is a fancy Air Force definition of who they are. I think of them as a skunk works. You know, you hear about a skunk works at a company where it's a big, cumbersome bureaucracy, and it has its culture and its biases and its layers of management, and nobody can get anything done and this and that. And so somebody stands up a skunk works, right? And it's 5 engineers working in a remote location off the company site, and they have complete freedom to do something. Yeah, and they're just kind of trying to stir up this big bureaucracy with some fresh ideas and new initiatives. That's kind of what AFWERX was for the Air Force and DoD. So as this kind of skunk works, they kind of say, well, you know, and it was incredible how insulting the skunk works was to the Air Force and to DoD and their SBIR programs. But this is a little bit of an example of that attitude as well. You know, we simply can't even put our topics into any of these regular or annual solicitations of the DoD. Those are just not good enough for us. So we're going to do our own solicitations. Thank you very much. So that's what they're doing. And they came out with this, what has now become their famous open topic, which basically says you can submit anything you want to the Air Force. Any idea you got, you can submit to the Air Force. Now, remember what I said a while ago, contract versus grant, and these are contract. The military uses SBIR STTR under contracts to solve the problems of the warfighter and those supporting the warfighter. This is a complete break with that. And it says, well, yeah, but in addition to that, do you have anything interesting that you think the Air Force might benefit from? And this is their quote: for non-defense commercial solutions to innovatively adapt to meet DoD stakeholder needs in a short time frame at a low cost. You know, again, we're a good bureaucracy, right? We can't be too clear or brief here. But it basically said, if you got something you think the Air Force will benefit from, submit it. We'll take a look at it. Now, that's weird. And it gets weirder, right? It just gets weirder from there. Notice this is non-defense commercial solution. So what they're saying is, we want to see your commercial products and services, and maybe you haven't actually sold any of them yet, but you're developing them for non-defense customers, and we want to see those that you think could be adapted to meet a need at the Air Force. So we're not talking about, you know, innovation, things people haven't thought of before. It's something you've already productized. It's just a question of, can you convert it to something the Air Force can use? Can you harden it? Can you make it resistant to certain types of abuse? Can it be lowered in terms of weight or size or energy requirements or something like that? So that's another weird part of what AFWERX is doing. But they're not done. Phase 1 is this little, basically 2-month project, $75K if it's an SBIR, $110K if it's an STTR. And part of what you're supposed to do with that money is go out and knock on doors at the Air Force and try to find a customer. So literally in phase one, AFWERX is paying you to find a customer. Now it sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. I understand that, but weird, outside the box, you bet. Very much outside the box. We're still not done. So your proposal, well, most proposals are, 20 pages of text with a few pictures in it. No, we don't want that. We at AFWERX want a 25 slide PowerPoint presentation. And sometimes they'll say, and we want you to do a pitch. You actually will come before a group of people and pitch your project. It's just completely outside the DoD norm, any which way you look at it. And you can say, this is great, this is what the military needs, or you can say, what a bunch of buffoons. And literally comments have gone anywhere from one extreme to the other. Look interesting? Well, you need to put on your calendar that AFWERX has said, we're going to put out our next phase one open topic solicitation on September 11th. And proposals will be due 1 month later. So you got to turn these proposals around pretty quickly, but put that on your calendar. Be ready for that that solicitation on 9/11. Let me offer a couple of words of caution about AFWERX as we talk about them here. There's a lot of inconsistencies, errors in their solicitations. They do not have a good editor. They're constantly changing them, and they end up with things that are contradictory, confusing, misstatements, and so on. So I just want you to be aware of that. It's very common to see mistakes. And unfortunately, if you're a newcomer, you don't know whether it's a mistake or you just don't understand what they're saying. Constantly changing what they want, how they want to do it. They really irked a lot of people inside the Air Force because money that was designated to solve specific warfighter problems, SBIR money, was taken from those specific warfighter problems and given to AFWERX to, gee, let's go see if we can find some fun projects to fund. And that really irritated people within those traditional Air Force circles. The SBIR community has also had its issues with AFWERX, and it started by AFWERX saying that no SBIR project ever done for the Air Force was of any value whatsoever, which insulted, hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that have done Air Force projects in the past. Again, just really made some enemies in the Air Force community and within the SBIR community. And also there's people who feel that AFWERX is violating certainly policy and maybe even federal law. There was also a interesting designation. I've had several clients get these where they submit a proposal and it comes back and it kind of says, well, we've got some good news and we've got some bad news. The good news is you've been selected. And of course, the client goes, oh my God, we've been selected. Right, we've got an SBIR from AFWERX. All right, we're in good shape. But then you read on and it says, unfortunately, we don't have any money to actually fund your project. So it's you won, but you're getting nothing because we have no money. And then they make some, and I think they've changed this now, but there was a time when they would basically say, so why don't you take this letter and go to some dumb yokel who really doesn't have very high standards when they fund things, like a venture capitalist or an angel investor, and see if they'll fund you. And it was really, again, it was insulting to the other potential funders out there. So, is AFWERX going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to SBIR STTR, as some people think, or will it be just a slow motion train wreck that will eventually go away? And some people think that too, but I want you to be aware of that they're not without controversy. Let's put it that way. I won't spend interest of time. I'm just pointing out, typos, mistakes, misspellings, you're saying things that are not completely accurate. There's a duplication of what you said here with what's in the next paragraph. it's just a very poorly done document typically. Now, maybe the new one coming out 9/11 will be really great, and they've taken care of all that. I sure hope so. Some recent changes in AFWERX open topic. See if there's anything I want to point to in particular here. I don't think there's, well, where was that? Remain. Oh, number 8. Open topic and focused open topic. So what's the difference? Well, open topic basically says, so have you got anything that the Air Force might want? And then a focused topic would be, do you have anything that the Air Force might want related to tactically responsive space? And you go, tactically responsive space? I'm not sure what that is, but if I knew what it was, do I really have freedom to propose, like an open topic would suggest, if it has to be within tactically responsive space? So open topic sometimes really means open, like bring us anything you want to. Other times it means, well, bring us anything you want to as long as it fits within our little box of something like tactically responsive space. Direct phase 2, as I told you earlier, is something available only at military, NIH, and Department of Education, and basically it allows you to skip phase 1, go straight to phase 2. DoD has done a fair number of direct phase 2 topics. Sometimes they are very specific topics, and it concerns me when I see a fairly specific topic, because that suggests that the Air Force knows that somebody has already done something, is working in this area. Are they really that knowledgeable about the industry, or did one of their subs come and tell them about it? Or what is there an insider, if you will, that has suggested to the military that they don't have to do a regular phase 1 because this company has already done that and they just need a direct phase 2. And it just concerns me when I see that, because it's suggesting that there may be less than open competition for some of these direct phase 2 topics at the military. So my suggestion is, you find a direct phase 2 topic at the military, I would want to have a conversation with what's called the technical point of contact, the TPOC, and really see if you can ferret out whether this really is a fair competition and they're looking for anybody to propose, or if they have already basically decided someone and they're just going through the motions of issuing the topic and solicitation. All right, so that was a lengthy discussion of, the military feels the traditional or regular solicitations are just not meeting the needs of the warfighter and the speed of innovation these days. Second thing that's going on at the military that's causing them to be squirrely is this pride in doing things differently. Some of the components, notably DARPA and Missile Defense Agency, did this, literally decades ago. AFWERX, as you can see, is clearly doing it, and they're more recent. And now it's just like every component wants to do things differently, just kind of for the sake of doing things differently. And this is an example of that. Just look at the last column. How many pages is the proposal? And as you can see, it's anywhere from 5 to 60. Depending on the component. Now, admittedly, some of these are phase 1s versus phase 2s, but even within the phase 1s, it's anywhere from 5 to 20 pages. And the phase 2s, it's anywhere from 30 to 60 pages. So I'm sorry, it's actually from the phase 2s, it's actually from 15 to 60 pages. So there's no consistency from one component to the other. Now, interestingly, the good news in this variability is each component, besides, I'm kind of poking fun at them here, they're kind of just wanting to change for change's sake, but they also are embracing SBIR STTR like they did not do in the early days of the programs, when they felt it was a a useless tax on their R&D budgets to have to give money to little companies. Now they recognize how valuable SBIR STTR is to their component, and they're trying to make it more valuable by tweaking the project a little bit. Reason why you don't see, and this is a FY21 example of this table, in about FY22, DoD said, you know, there is such variability among our components and it's changing so rapidly, we can't even do these tables anymore. And I'm thinking, hello, that's a sign of a problem when you, the DoD office, can't keep track of all the changes. But they didn't see it that way. So it's continued to get worse here. This is the 24.3 solicitation. And as you can see, the participating components, Navy, Air Force, Chem Bio, Defense Health, Defense Threat Reduction, and Missile Defense. And if you just look at what those 6 components are doing, and notice regular solicitation, 24.3, not all 12 or 13 components of the military participate. It's only about half of them. And this is typical. Each regular solicitation, it won't be everybody. It'll be some of the components, not all of the components. So Army's not even participating in this. But here are some of the things that if you look at the instructions for each of those 6 components, these are some of the things that differ one to the next, and again, make it harder for you to know what to do for a particular topic that you find. All right, so third reason why DoD is kind of complicated and difficult right now is this reorganization within the greater DoD community. Think of SBIR STTR as a very small tail and a very big dog. And so when Air Force USAF became a component or a subcomponent of the Department of Air Force, it wasn't because SBIR office said they should do that. It wasn't because the DoD's SBIR office said they should do that. It's because some muckety mucks in the Pentagon / Congress decided this should be done. And so it's done at those high levels, and then it kind of trickles down and it has to be then adapted into the SBIR STTR program. The same thing when Space Development Agency was added to the military and Defense Health Agency was created. These are not things that SBIR tried to create. It's SBIR having to respond to that. All right. Fourth of our 5 reasons why DoD is kind of complicated is that we've got a quote unquote new contractor and submission portal. It's been several years now, but this newer contract support contractor, let me back up. The DoD SBIR office doesn't have much personnel itself, so they rely on a defense contractor, an outside company, to do a lot of the legwork on the DoD SBIR program. That DoD SBIR office basically fired the old contractor several years ago and went out on RFP to get a new one. They selected the one we have now. And even though they've been in the saddle now for at least 3 years, maybe 4 by this point, they still haven't gotten their act together, in my opinion. Just some of the problems, and upper right text box, when these particular screenshots were made, this official DoD SBIR website, which is helping you access almost $2 billion a year in SBIR STTR funds, said, oh, there are 8 DoD topics open at this time. And in reality, there were 9. So they were missing one. Now, why were they missing one? Well, it turned out, for reasons we won't get into, they weren't accepting questions about that 9th topic. And so DSIP just decided to ignore that topic. Now, why would you do that? I mean, you and I may find that 9th topic to be exactly what we want to submit a proposal on, whether we can ask questions or not. So who the hell are they, in my opinion, to be deciding not to cover a topic because they're not allowing questions on it. Lower right or lower left, excuse me, gives you other problems that we've seen. The templates in this submission website are useless. And that's not overstating, useless in terms of you developing the proposal. The only thing they're useful for is when you're submitting it. So here's a template for submitting your abstract. But is the abstract helpful in writing? Is the template helpful in writing the abstract? No, it's useless. So they created templates that are only good for one purpose and are not real clear and not very open about that. There are misspellings in this submission portal. And again, this thing's been uploaded and live for years now. There's still misspellings in it. Why don't they clean up the misspellings? And one thing that really irks me is they've got a help desk, which, as I say, ain't that helpful. In contrast, the grants.gov, if you were submitting a proposal to NIH or USDA or some of the other grant agencies, they've got a help desk that's open 24/7. And you can phone or email them and you'll get a hold of somebody and they are helpful and they understand this horrible grants.gov submission system. That's grants.gov. What about this DoD help desk? Oh, we're open Monday to Friday. Well, and actually we're only open 9 to 5 Eastern time. So those of you out on the West Coast or Hawaii, too bad. Oh, and we don't accept phone calls at our help desk. If you want our help, you'll have to send us an email. You know, just how unhelpful can a help desk be? You know, you're sitting there, you're coming down on the deadline, you're getting an error message, it doesn't make sense. I got to send an email and it's Sunday afternoon, so you're not going to answer it until maybe tomorrow. Yeah, it's crazy. And again, this is supporting a $2 billion a year DoD SBIR program. Some of the individual DoD components will have help desks. And so you find yourself on Sunday afternoon with a problem, you might look to see if the component you're submitting to, the Army, Air Force, Navy, ChemBio, whoever, did they have a help desk that you could contact? All right. Well, that's, again, I'm trying to set the stage on why DoD acts the way that it does. It's also to be noted that, I'm just trying to not only just kind of beat them up for why they're difficult, but also help you understand when you run into issues or something doesn't seem to work or it doesn't make sense. It could be you because you're a newcomer and you don't know better, or it could be the system as it exists today at the military. And I am apologetic for what you have to deal with at DoD. But on the other hand, if you're willing to put up with it and beat your head against the wall a bit, again, you can access your share of $2 billion a year, have access to a potential opportunity to have a long-term contract selling products and services to the military, become kind of an insider at the military and get other contracts. This could be the start of something big. You just have to be prepared to deal with some malarkey here to begin with. Meredith, let me pause before we kind of shift gears here and get into proposal preparation. Do we have any questions at this point?
No questions in the Q&A or chat.
All right. All right. Well, let's press on then. So I'm gonna recommend to y'all that you kind of follow a process in developing your proposal, and this is what I would recommend to you. This is just a starting point. It's, if this doesn't fit your work style, fine. Or you want to start with this process and then tweak it and modify it the way that it best serves you, that's fine. I'm just giving you, if I'm doing a proposal, and in this case, a proposal to the military for SBIR STTR, this is what I would do. All right, so first step up there is you gotta find a topic. right? You got to find a topic because, and again, we're trying to find this within a solicitation is the term used by SBIR STTR for what you and I would call a request for proposals. But the military, rather than calling it a solicitation, and there's good reasons for this, but it just looks like more government gobbledygook to you and me. They call it a broad agency announcement or a BAA. And sometimes you'll hear terms of commercial solutions opening and SBO, small business opportunity, used by components of the military when they're talking about their SBIR STTR program. Again, this is all with good reason, but I'm with you. I just find it more confusing the more jargon and terminology they throw around. If you will use the term BAA, you'll be great. And frankly, if you use the term solicitation, that's, again, the general term used in SBIR STTR. And I think most people in the military you're talking to will understand when you're saying solicitation that you're referring to their BAA. Where do you find the BAAs? You can do one of three places. I've shown you two there. One is our website. Go to our SBIR page and scroll to the bottom. We're linked to the DoD as well as the other SBIR website, agency websites. Or you can go to SBIR.gov, which is the official SBIR website of the federal government. And there should be a link there. I'm thinking I've been looking at the new quote unquote improved SBIR.gov, and I'm not sure where that listing is now, but it should be there. Or as I showed you right after break a while ago, you will find the DoD solicitations if you go to www.DoD.SBIR.STTR.mil. So again, DoD.SBIR.STTR.mil, and the homepage, it will have boxes there on the homepage, and those will be for 24.3, 24.C, 24.4, and 24.D. You can search broader than the military if you want to go look at other agencies that might have topics of relevancy to you. And you're saying, man, I don't think so. I think I just need to talk with the military. Well, let's use an example here. And this is a listing of the 11 SBIR agencies are down the left side over there. And then the columns are for different technical areas, general technical areas. Let's just take space technology, the first one. Let's say you've got a project involving space technology. And so you're thinking, well, now that I know we got U.S. Space Force and we got the Space Development Agency, I think I will submit to the military. Well, did you forget that NASA is also one of the 11 SBIR STTR agencies? And certainly NASA is interested in space. That's obviously one of their main areas. And if you didn't do a broader search of topics, you may never realize that National Science Foundation, NSF, even has space-related topics. So again, the problem that if you're not careful is you too quickly say, okay, I'm interested in the military because I'm interested in X, in this case, space technology. And you forget that you ought to be looking other places that might be a better fit for your project. Or here's an idea, other places that I can submit the same proposal I'm going to send to the military, I can send a version of that same proposal to NASA and maybe to NSF. All right, so where do you do this general keyword search to these other agencies? So you go to SBIR.gov, and this is the general official SBIR website of the federal government. And again, the new site looks a little differently than this, but you're looking for a funding tab and click on topic areas. And it's subtle, but it's basically a search engine here on down the left side and across the top. So we're going to do an open search. And at this point in time, I was interested in what agencies have topics related to hemorrhage. So I type in hemorrhage, I hit search, and it tells me what agencies have currently open topics that contain the keyword hemorrhage. And as you see, I've got 3 hits. Now, you see hemorrhage, you go, well, gee, that's health. That must be that National Institutes of Health people. They would have that topic, right? Now look at the first two topics. They're military. And again, this is why you do this keyword searching, because you might have thought something related to hemorrhaging is going to be, I would have to apply to NIH with that. No, there's an interest at Defense Health Agency in that. And only the third one down there actually turned out to be NIH. Problem with this search engine is, to just put it mildly, it's not reliable. You don't know whether it's giving you all of the possibilities or not. And you go, wait a minute, this is the official government website and it's not reliable. Well, here's an example. The day that I took this screenshot, SBIR.gov said, oh yeah, there's only 3 agencies with SBIR topics currently open. And in reality, I knew that day that there were 6 of them that were open, including DoD, the largest, by far the largest single agency. None of their topics were in the search engine at SBIR.gov. And, you know, how can that be? You know, how can that, it just doesn't make sense. Well, the problem is, even though this is the official SBIR website of the federal government, this search engine is a voluntary participation by the agencies. And Small Business Administration, SBA, runs this website, and they ask DoD to load their topics, please. DoD doesn't do it. SBA goes back and says, DoD, we sure would appreciate if you'd load up your topics. DoD doesn't do it. SBA goes back and says, gosh, guys, would you please load up your topics? We've got people wondering why we don't have any DoD topics in the search engine. DoD may still not do it. And SBA can't do a thing about it. DoD is, well, you know, DoD, they're big, they're autonomous, they got nuclear weapons, they can do whatever they want to, right? And that comes to deciding whether they want to put in the search engine or not. Now, this is better than it was. It's still not perfect, or still not reliable. And a good example is the last time I tried to see, is everything in the search engine? Everything was, except the AFWERX topics. And the AFWERX topics had not been uploaded. Probably again because AFWERX, because they're so independent and so important and so skunkworksy, that they just didn't bother. So you ought to use the search engine, but don't depend on it. Don't say that's the only thing I'm going to search. So other search engines, grants.gov has a search engine, searches for grants. DoD SBIR STTR.mil, you just saw that website. It has a search engine. SAM, that Kimberly introduced you to a while ago, has a search engine for contracts. So grants.gov searches grants all across the federal government. SAM.gov searches contracts across all the government. Let's take a look at the search engine here at DoD. Again, this is the DoD SBIR STTR.mil website, or also known as the DSIP website. And the middle, you pull down the tab under topic info, and yes. There we go. Topic and topic information, or you can do it in the side quick link over here. Click on either of those, and it takes you to what I showed you earlier. This was is the search engine. You make sure that it's searching active rather than past and no longer relevant topics. You plug in keyword or words that you want to search on, and you hit search, and it basically tells you how many topics have that keyword or words in it. And you can do a little bit more searching if you hit more filters, but it's not a very sophisticated search engine. It's like there's got 2 more variables that you can search on, but it's not very rigorous. Now, I've spent a fair amount of time this morning beating up DoD and their SBIR STTR program. Let me give them a major pat on the back, a major attaboy for this. This is something they have done really, really well, and I will highly recommend it to you. In fact, as the title of the slide says, you got to do this if you are going to compete for DoD SBIR STTR. You must do this. There is no way you can get around this, and that is to sign up for their listserv. It is impossible, and I don't think that is an overstatement to say that it is impossible for you to otherwise keep up with all the topics that are being released, the out-of-cycle topics, the regular solicitations, the AFWERX solicitations, the focus topics, the whatever they decide to do. It is impossible to stay on top of that. And I guess if you just spend 24/7 just looking at the DoD DSIP website and trying to figure it out, maybe. But this is really helpful because, and I was literally looking at our first break a few minutes ago. There was a email, because I'm on the listserv, released in which Army has, and there must be 20 out-of-cycle topics that Army just released. Now, if you're not on the listserv, you wouldn't know that. If I weren't on the listserv, I wouldn't know it. And this is my job, right? And I'm doing this full time working on this. I didn't know it. You go, oh, Greenwood, I hate listservs because they put you, they send all this minutia and stuff that you don't care about. DoD doesn't do that. DoD actually sends you topics when they get released under SBIR STTR, and notification when a new BAA or solicitation is released. That's it. That's it. You don't get inundated with a bunch of garbage by this listserv. So sign up for this listserv, okay? Here's how you do it. So again, go to the DoD SBIR STTR.mil website. Here on quick links, DSIP listserv. Click on that, and you type in your email address, you're done. And this is an example of what you get. You're going to get this at sporadic dates when some component of the military releases a topic. So this was a heads up on 13th of August that Army had just released 2 topics. One of them on, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Interesting. Okay. And one on hybrid electric powertrain. Okay. And it directs me back to the DSIP website for seeing the topic. But the important thing is it said, Greenwood, did you know that Army has just released 2 topics? The topics are, if that's interesting to you, you need to look into that. And if I wasn't signed up, I'd be doing that, right? I'd be sitting there in the dark getting the mushroom treatment. So sign up for the listserv. DoD does have 2 websites. I mentioned that to you earlier. One is the DSIP that we've been talking a lot about this morning. The second is the Defense SBIR STTR.mil website. And in addition to this, you've got 12 or 13 individual component. I'm sorry, I'm understating that, because in the Navy, you've got the NAV Air versus NAV Sea. Well, I guess it's all into the same website, it's just different parts of the same website. Okay, so you got 12 or 13 plus these 2. So you only got 14 websites to keep track of with the military. Number 2, what do you do with number 2? There's not a lot of reason to use it, but let me give you a couple of thoughts here. One is it has this participation guide, if you will, that you may find useful as you are preparing your proposal, particularly your first proposal. So this might be helpful, might give you a little different take on what you need to write, what you need to emphasize, than what the DSIP website would say, for example. The other thing that this second website has, which I have found useful, is they have these commercialization readiness program links for Army, Navy, and Air Force. And the really useful thing is you click on those and you learn, again, 30,000 foot level, but you learn, how does Army procure new technology? How does Air Force procure new technology? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not a military brat. I've not been employed by the military. I don't know how all that bureaucracy works. but I realize I'm going to have to learn it if I'm going to participate in their SBIR STTR programs. And I need to convey in my proposals that I'm learning it, that I'm getting a handle on it. These resources, these 3 sites, the commercial readiness programs for Army, Navy, and Air Force, I found to be useful for that. All right. A 5th change, I think I jumped out of cycle when I put this slide down farther than I should have. This should be up closer when I did the first one on emergence of a new mindset, second, pride in doing things differently. And I was through 4. Number 5 is, I mentioned, is this requirement under the 2002 reauthorization that all DoD components have at least 1 open topic annually. And I think Congress, when they mandated this, they were thinking about what AFWERX was doing and all the accolades that people were given AFWERX, because the military for decades has been this closed, respond to our problems or don't bother sending a proposal to us. And suddenly AFWERX changed that, and suddenly people could submit proposals, and suddenly people were getting awards, even though they're the little $50,000 or $75,000 awards, they're getting awards. So Congress is hearing from their constituents how great AFWERX is. And so Congress says, well, let's put that into all of the components of the military. So they mandate this, and, thinking that everybody will do like AFWERX. Well, unfortunately, the legislation doesn't define open topic. I guess Congress thought everybody will know what we mean, right? Well, no, the components look at it and say open topic. Okay, so how are we going to define open topic? And some of them, like AFWERX, it's, you can propose anything you want to, as long as you can tell us that it's something that you develop for non-defense purposes, and you would have to adapt it technically to meet our Air Force needs. Army has said, okay, we're going to have not just 1 open topic, we're going to have a couple of dozen open topics a year. None of them as open as AFWERX, but some pretty open, although some are focused. I mentioned that earlier. Remember, focused means it's open to any idea you've got within some narrow, cybersecurity for missile silos. It has to be within that narrow band there. Navy came in with a rah, we're the Navy. It has to meet the Navy needs. But interestingly, and this just closed yesterday, literally yesterday, Navy's open topic was very much like AFWERX. Do you have something that you think with some adaptation will meet the needs of the Navy? It's under, what was it, obsolescence and sustainability or something like that. Anyway, it was a, how do we keep legacy craft, shipcraft going, but again, very broad. Now, a major difference in what Navy said, as I told you with AFWERX, a big part of your phase 1 is going out and knocking on doors at the Air Force trying to find a customer. At Navy, they find the customer, the stakeholder, and they introduce you before they give you the award. So you end up spending phase 1 talking with the stakeholder about how you need to adapt your non-defense technology to meet Navy's needs. SOCOM, again, we're open to what? We're open to vehicle vulnerabilities related to software. So anything related to vehicle vulnerabilities related to software, well, that's a pretty broad open topic, right? Now, I'm obviously being facetious about that. It's pretty darn narrow. Other components, some are obviously, like Navy, have jumped on the AFWERX lead, and others like SOCOM have not. But again, at least once a year, you should expect every component of the military to have an open topic. And one thing you might do, let's say you're thinking Defense Health Agency is really who you want to work with. You might want to strike up a dialogue with their SBIR office. And part of that dialogue would be, how are you guys going to implement the open topic requirement? Are you going to have something as broad as an AFWERX or the Navy, or are you going to be more focused, open, like some of the things that Army has done? So when we say open topic, what do we mean? Well, there's open topic versus open topic versus, open topic. Now, what do I mean? DoD, because this isn't confusing enough, DoD uses the term open topic at least to mean 3 different things in their SBIR STTR program. The first thing they mean is a topic is open when they first release it. So on August 16th, the FY24.3 and 24.C solicitations were released. That means the topic's opened on August 16th. That's definition number 1. But a more formal definition is a topic only opens when DoD will begin accepting proposals on that topic. So those topics that came out back on August, I'm saying August 21st here. Well, anyway, the mid-August release of those topics, that wasn't open. When it really opens is September 18th, which is when they start accepting proposals. Now that topic is open. And what's the third definition? It's one I'm using in this conversation about what AFWERX does and what the reauthorization requires, which is one that gives you more freedom to propose a project, an innovation to the military. Why do they use the same term to mean 3 different things? I don't know. It isn't good. It's unfortunate and can be very confusing. Again, I'm not trying to beat them up. I just want you to realize that when you see the term when you see the term open topic, ask yourself what meaning of open topic do they have on this particular use of that term? Because if it means, for example, the second one, and you're thinking it's the first one, then it's going to put you behind the 8 ball in terms of not knowing about topics being released and available for you to look at for a full month. Give you some examples of open topics. Again, some are pretty specific here about what they want to see. Others are very broad. Now this looks pretty specific, but it is actually very broad when they say defense-related dual-purpose technology solutions with a clear Air Force or Space Force technology need. That's basically, do you have anything that you have developed for non-defense customers that you might adapt for our use at the Air Force? And then the one up here for SOCOM was one, open topic for special operations vehicles. So it's open, but it can only address, don't send us anything about Special Operations Command, only something related to our vehicles. And we'll tell you in the topic description what that means. Army has gone, as I said earlier, really quite over the top in terms of number of open topics. And these are examples. There are some like this that are only open to those that are involved in certain competition. Let's go ahead and, before we get into this slide, let me go ahead and take our second break of the morning. I'm showing 11:10. So let's come back at 11:20 Central Time. At 11:20, we will go ahead and again, I'll see if we have any questions, and then we'll finish with the rest of our presentation. So 11:20. Meredith, any questions?
Yes, we got one question in the Q&A. Would a
All right.
mentorship in SBA play a role in submission negatively?
A mentorship. I'm trying to figure out what kind of mentorship we might be talking about. I mean, it doesn't sound like anything that would be negative, but maybe they can better describe for us what the mentorship is, and I might be able to better respond. But in general, no, it should not be.
Okay, thank you. If we get more of an explanation on that or more information,
Okay.
I'll share that with you.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Meredith.
That's it.
All right. And I realize we've got a lot of material to cover and just over an hour to do it. So I'm going to kind of take a deep breath here. And some of these slides are stuff that, I mean, again, we could spend a lot of time on this, and I just don't want to get bogged down. So I'll just leave this as an example where, you know, there's some thoughts here about does open topic really make good sense overall in the program, but that's not something that makes a big difference for today's discussion. So I'll leave that to you if you want to talk about whether open topics are a good idea or not, but we don't have to get into it today. So let's get into again, back to our, you know, our steps. We found a topic. Hopefully we're happy with it. We're ready to run with it. What do we do with it? Well, the first thing you want to do with it, in our opinion, is talk to the agency about it. And you go, well, why would I want to do that? Well, when you read the topic, you'll probably have more questions and answers in what they have to say. And it looks interesting, and you think what you're interested in is relevant to this topic, but you're not quite sure. And there's some mention of, you know, what you do in the Navy option period or something. Well, you want to have a conversation with the agency to try to get that ferreted out, if at all possible. Who do you want to talk to? The military. The person is called the TPOC, technical point of contact. This is the primary individual that you would want to talk with. You might also talk with potential users. If you actually know someone that might be a phase 3 user, that would be great. You might also talk to the help desk if it's a more of a generic question about what I had one the other day, for example, that Navy wanted a 1-part abstract, but the template, the DSIP template, called for a 2-part abstract. So I contacted Navy about, you know, do you want me to do your usual 1 topic in 2, or how do you want that handled? And I went to the program director for that. Contract agencies, you're very limited on when you can talk to them about anything topic specific. Contract agencies basically are in a blackout period when the topic is open. Now, remember that term open? You go, okay, Greenwood, which open are you talking about now? The time period when you can no longer talk to your military TPOC, your topic author, is, what was that date? September 18th. Actually, it'll be the September 17th, because September 18th, they will start accepting proposals. So between now and September 17th, you can talk to them. That is because the topic is only in quote unquote draft form right now. And that allows them to get around the rule that says they can't talk to you when there's a topic, an official topic on the street. So right now, even though the solicitation is out in pre-release form, you can talk to the TPOC between now and September 17th. So homework assignment, you found yourself a topic, you need to try to line up a conversation with the TPOC between now and September 17th. Go, how do I do that? Well, I would send an email. In most cases, the military doesn't give you a phone number because they don't want you calling the TPOC. They want you to email them. So shoot them an email. Hi, interested in your topic, have a few questions. May I have 15 minutes of your time for a quick call at your convenience sometime in the next week. And email means it's not interruptive. You've planted the seed that why you want to talk to them, and you've also put them on notice that you're not going to waste their time. You only want 15 minutes of time. You know they're busy. You know they got a lot of irons in the fire. Just want 15 minutes of their time. Hopefully they will agree to that. Now, if they say, gee, I just really can't do a call, email me your questions, then take advantage of that. You know, email I don't think is as good as a phone conversation for your questions, but it's better than nothing. So take advantage of it if they'll at least offer that up. Your TPOC is the person that is your the individual who's been designated by the component, the DoD component, to answer questions about the topic, and also in many cases is responsible for finding a couple of other DoDers to be reviewers along with themselves to review the proposals that come in. So good idea to contact this individual if at all possible. Now, as I show up there, SOCOM and AFWERX do not provide you a name for this TPOC for different reasons, but most of the other components you will see that name. This just says that with some of the annual topics, you have less than 30 days for this period when you can talk to the TPOC. And as you can see, some of these it's only a couple of weeks. So you really have to be on top of these. Now, again, you get on the listserv, you're going to know when SOCOM R1 release 1 comes out, and you would know then when you could reach them. Here's where the TPOC generally is found in the topic. It's right at the end. And many times there'll be multiple TPOCs with no explanation why one versus the other. Generally, I would send an email to both of them, you know, a single email to, you know, dear Mr. Totten and Story, you know, and hopefully one or the other will respond. Now, another place you can get questions answered is back at our DSIP website. You got here on the far right-hand side, a little balloon that says, you know, people have been asking questions and they've been answered. And as you see down here, this is where they are actually telling you what was the question that was asked. Here's the answer that was provided. Now, why do I say it's a poor substitute? Because your question and the answer will be shared with everybody. Every other person who, every other company that looks at this website is going to see the question and the answer. Takes away the competitive advantage by you asking a question that might give you an inside track on a topic. Let's see. I'm not going to worry about that. Number 4, though, I do want to point to DoD will use the term commercialization. What is your commercialization plan? What's your commercialization strategy? And you're thinking, well, they want to know, you know, when I productize this and sell it at Walmart, how am I going to do that? No, they're using the term commercialization in a broad sense of turning research into product. And the first product that they want to see, and this is almost every case with DoD, the first product the DoD wants to see is you selling to them, making it available to them, getting it into the hands of the warfighter, somebody supporting the warfighter. Remember the urgency of the innovation and getting it out there. So they want to be your first customer. Now they like if you are productizing a version of this for others, for non-DoD, because A, it'll help keep the price down, and B, it gives them greater assurance that you're going to continue to provide this product long term, and you won't end up stopping production when they still want it at the military. All right, so you got fun topic, talked with the agency, hopefully got some good information from them. Got to register, and this is where Kimberly and the Apex Accelerator can be really helpful, because all the SBIR STTR agencies require electronic submission of your proposal. DoD has its submission portal, which is the DSIP, the ugly orange ribbon website we've seen time and time again this morning. You're going to have to make up to 7 different registrations. Now, not all of you will do this because some of you have already got an employer identification number, an EIN. Maybe you've even got a unique entity identifier, a UEI, but you probably don't have a cage code. You probably aren't registered with SAM. You probably aren't registered on the DSIP portal. You may not be registered. Well, you might be on login.gov, and you probably are not registered on SBIR.gov. You got to register all those places to submit your phase one proposal. You go, you got to be kidding me. How come you have to register all these places? Because it's the federal government. Any questions? This is not an exercise in efficiency or productivity. It is the federal government, and over time, they've added all these things that they want you to register on, and none of it's coordinated. You have to do each one independently. So get this done, get it done now, get it out of the way. Now, SAM can be a pain in the patoot for a variety of reasons. In part, you don't know what the questions are that they're asking. And by the way, the reason for SAM is basically it's the federal government's way of being able to pay you once you have a contract. And they're stupidly, I don't think that term's being overstated here, stupidly, DoD and most of the other SBIR STTR agencies said, well, what the heck? Let's just make every person submitting an SBIR STTR proposal register on SAM, even though it's really only needed by companies that have a contract or a grant. So, 5 times as many companies are registering for these federal registrations as need to, but that's the way the system is set up. So again, Kimberly and the Apex Accelerator can be good resources to help you with registering on SAM and login.gov and the others. SAM is the worst one. You get that out of the way. The others are relatively easy to do. All right, so get registered, get it out of the way. Now we got to draft this proposal. Typical sections you will see: significance. Why is this important? Innovation. What's different, unique? What are your team qualifications? What are the objectives for the phase one work? What is your phase one research plan? This is all pretty typical of what DoD or any other agency will ask you in an SBIR STTR proposal. The atypical thing is, how much do they ask you to talk about commercialization or phase 3 of the project? NSF has always been the one extreme, wanting pages and pages of commercialization discussion. NIH, National Institutes of Health, has been the other extreme, where they want a couple of sentences is all. DoD is somewhere in between. So figure 1 or 2 pages on commercialization. And remember, again, the commercialization at military needs to focus on the military. And if it's Army you're applying to, talk about Army. If it's Navy you're talking about, talk about Navy. Don't send an Army commercialization discussion to the Navy, because the Navy doesn't want to hear how the Army's going to commercialize it. They want to know how you're going to get it into their naval hands. Your proposal will go through basically 3 reviews before it gets funded or declined. The first one is a pre-screen in which clerical support people with rulers will look at your proposal, and you say, why rulers? Because they're measuring margin widths. Most agencies have 1-inch margin width requirements. You don't have 1 inch, you got 7/8. Well, you may have been have your proposal tossed out. Font size, type of font, single spacing, check boxes. Did you check them all on the cover page? Nitpicky stuff that doesn't seem important relative to this incredible innovation that you've come up with that's going to solve this massive DoD problem. The people performing the pre-screen don't know, don't care. All they know is their job is to look at the cover sheet, and if you left a box unchecked, they are to throw the proposal in the trash. Okay, so don't underestimate the importance of the nitpicks. Get past the nitpickers, or the rules police, as my my stepson, who's an NIH reviewer, says. We use the term rules police for those folks. Then you get a review by the technical reviewers. Now, the military, this is typically, say, 2 to 4 internal DoD personnel reviewing the proposal. One is a good chance will be your TPOC that you've been talking to, hopefully. And then the TPOC picks a couple of their buddies to review the proposals. They review it for the quality of the research as well as the commercialization potential. and they have some scoring system. Everybody uses a different scoring system. Seems like AFWERX is simply selected or not selected. And then within selected, you have selected but not funded, selected, funded. Okay, so you get some sort of scoring. And that scoring then goes to the ultimate decision makers, who are typically, again, in the agency, and is their job to make the final decisions. And a good example of this was 2011, when Department of Energy, the reviewers, technical reviewers, step number 2, said there were 641 proposals that should be funded, but DOE only had money for about a third of them. So DOE staff had to sit down and say which of these fundable proposals become the awarded ones. Don't believe nitpick exists. This is the nitpick sheet, actually from Department of Energy several years ago. And again, did you check all the boxes? Do you have the PI with at least a minimum number of hours? Is exceeding 25 pages? Is the font smaller than 12 point? And you violate any of this stuff, your proposal will be thrown out. So real key is you got to follow the instructions. If you don't follow the instructions, you may have the proposal thrown out, or you irk the reviewer because you don't present it in a way that they're accustomed to seeing it. DoD proposals, all components now, this is varied over time, but right now, every DoD component must accept, or must receive, excuse me, a proposal consisting of 7 volumes. Now it's going to be files to you and me, just, but they're called volumes. That's just the terminology used by the military. New is this volume 7. This has just been required within the past, I'd say 45 days. It has been mandated as a 7th volume required in your proposal. Do volume 1 number first. This is a name, address, phone number, congressional district. Do it first because this pre-populates other volumes with things like the name of your company and the proposal number and so on. So do volume number 1 first. Volume 2 is going to be the heart of the proposal. We're going to talk more about that because of that. This is, if you like, a graphic in terms of what all the pieces are. This would be the DoD Phase 1 package. A blue box suggests this is a form that you have to fill out and attach. Green box suggests it's a file that you create in word processing in Word and then convert to a PDF and attach to one of the forms. And again, there's that volume 7 down there, the foreign relations disclosure. What you put into volume number 2, the technical proposal, is varying dramatically. This is what really differs one component to the next, is what they require for volume number 2. A couple of other things that are required, make sure you attach those in volume 5. Key question you ought to be asking yourself is, where the hell are the instructions? Now that may sound a little crude, but you're gonna say that, trust me, because you're gonna be frustrated trying to find the darn instructions for a topic that you've located. The answer is you got to hunt for them. It ain't gonna be easy. So let me give you a couple of examples of what you would do here. I guess I give it to you in text form, and I'll show it to you graphically, the steps here. So first of all, is the topic a regular topic, an annual topic, or another? Okay. Regular, and we talked about this, right? It has a suffix of 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, or point A, point B, point C. Excuse me. That's a regular. Annual will be 0.4 or point D. That designates it as annual. And other, that's where there's a little bit of inconsistency, but if it's AFWERX, then the topic number starts with an X. Okay, so determine which is it. Now, if it's regular, then you go to the regular BAA, regular solicitation, and for each component in that solicitation, there'll be a set of instructions. So right now, you got 24.3, and let's say you're interested in one of the Air Force topics. then you go to the Air Force section of the 24.3 solicitation, and there'll be instructions in there. Now, sometimes, this is point B there, sometimes those specific instructions, in this case for Air Force, will say, refer back to the overall instructions, DoD instructions for Section 4. And so you have to go back to the front of the regular BAA where there are a general set of instructions, and you use those for that discussion. Annual, if it's an annual topic, then it'll be part of one of those releases. Remember, I showed you that a while ago. It's R1, R2. They're like R20 is how many releases they've had so far this year. You want to look for the release where your topic is included. And it will have a set of instructions. Again, they may refer you back to the general instructions, in which case you go back to the annual BAA. And if it's other type of topic, then you're going to be looking at that solicitation. It should be contained therein, and AFWERX does a pretty good job of that. All right, so let's do this graphically. And this is for the regular topic. So you're in the DSIP website, and you see this topic, technologies for the quick and easy detection, decontamination, and prevention and spread of Novichok, contamination. And that looks interesting to you. Click on it, and notice you can tell from the number there, this is part of 24.3, so it's part of the regular solicitation. You can click on the topic. Here's the topic description. And again, there's the number, CBD 24.3 means fiscal year 24, third regular solicitation. There's the topic, but it doesn't give you the instruction. It's just the topic. So go back to the SIP, and this column is component instructions. You click on CBD, and that opens up the CBD, the Chemical Biological Defense section of the DoD instructions from that solicitation. And so here are the guidelines. Here's what you do for volume 1. Here's what you do for volume 2. And there's an error in what they tell you to do here, which I wanted to highlight for you. The first sentence under technical volume 2 says the technical volume is not to exceed 20 pages and must follow the formatting requirements provided in the DoD SBIR solicitation program BAA. The error there is it says following the formatting requirements. It not only has to follow the formatting requirements, which is width the margins, single spacing, font size, all that stuff. It's also content instructions from that site. So this is an error in the instructions for this. But now we will go, where do you find the general instructions? Again, if you go back to the DSIP website and the topic listing, solicitation instructions are right next to component instructions. So we click on DoD SBIR 24.3. It'll take you to SBIR 24.3, FY24.3, and here are the instructions. Here is the format, and this is what I mean by format versus content. See, format is type of file, the length, the layout, the nitpicks, size of paper, all that stuff. And then content is also having to be followed by the CBD. And there it shows us you are to start with a section called Identification Significance, followed by a section called Phase 1 Technical Objectives, followed by Phase 1 Statement of Work, and so on. And this continues on to the next page. So that's where the instructions are for a regular topic. And notice you had to look at, in this case, 2 different sets of instructions because there's the set lower right corner specific to CBD, and then there are instructions upper right corner that are referred to by the CBD instructions that are the general instructions. All right, same thing, but for a annual topic. Again, we go into the DSIP website, which is DoD SBIR STTR.mil. And here's an open topic of interest, artificial intelligence, machine learning focused open topic. Looks interesting to us. So Where do we find out more about it? We can, and this confirms for us that it's an open topic because it's 2024-4, which is the same as federal fiscal year 24.4 means it's the open, it's the annual solicitation. Go to the component instructions, and this is actually where we'll find the topic description as well as the instructions. Click on Army, and it takes you to the Army instructions for the 24.4, and this is release number 18. So this is one of multiple topics that were released at the same time and bunched under what's called release 18. And in those instructions, it tells you it's going to be, your proposal needs to exist in the following sections. This is what volume 1 needs to look like. This is the content of volume 1. This is what volume 2 needs to look like. And there, now in this case, it says these instructions in the Army discussion supersede those in the general solicitation. So you don't even look at the general DoD solicitation instructions, and it tells you that the technical volume, it's not 20 pages as the general instructions say, it's only 5 pages, and it has to consist of 2 parts, one of which is the technical approach, and the second part is the team qualifications. So in this case, Army gave you a set of instructions that are self-contained within the release. Now, did anyone see the error on this page? I didn't spend a lot of time on it, so you might have missed it, but the error is up here when they're telling you that you have to include the following 6 volumes. What did we just say how many volumes there are now? 7. There's a 7th volume that's required. Now you go, well, Greenwood, that's what you get for having an old slide. I downloaded this slide or the materials for this slide Tuesday. So as of Tuesday, this Army topic had an error in that it claimed there were only 6 volumes when there's a 7th required. Again, I'm not trying to just beat up the military. I'm just saying, you know, you might be sitting there looking, why is it only 6 volumes? Scratching your head, wondering why. It's because they're screwing up and not doing their job, keeping track of all these changes that they're responsible for. All right. What is this volume 7 we're talking about anyway? What do you got to do? Well, this is the disclosure that you have to do. DoD, all SBIR STTR agencies have jumped on this, but to a lesser degree. DoD has gone on both arms, hands, feet. They have jumped into this. And they are now requiring a separate volume to have basically this 8-question checklist included in your proposal. So you can see on the second, kind of the middle and right-hand slides here, it's yes, no. Is any owner or covered individual of the applicant or awarding party or awardee party to any malign foreign talent recruitment program? Yes, no. If no, then go on to question number 2. If yes, then you need to disclose the required information. DoD is requiring not only that this be, again, a separate volume 7. Before it was just an attachment to your proposal. It now has to be a separate volume. But DoD is gone pretty heavy-handed on how they are reviewing your response to these questions. And when you say, well, when you say no, then that's a bit of a red flag to them. It's like, okay, so what's the foreign connection here? What's the foreign problem? Even if you just answer yes to everything, in which case you wouldn't have, I'm sorry, you answer, if you answer anything yes, it's going to raise a red flag. If everything's no, looks pretty mundane, pretty vanilla, they still go out and conduct, and this is why I say it's amateurish, it's basically a Google search of your company and your people to see if there's anything out there that ties you to any foreign interests. And if there is, and boy, you didn't disclose it, then the red flag is really waving, because it looks like you're trying to hide something at that point. So recognize that this has become a very big deal to the military, and make sure you not only include volume 7 and you check all these boxes correctly, but as you check them, remember there's somebody in an office with a laptop doing Google searches to see whether they think you have disclosed completely your foreign relationships and contacts, and whether they can dig up any dirt on you that you might not have disclosed. The other thing you're trying to do in your answers, I think, is show that anything that you answered yes to is some relatively mundane, no big deal, they shouldn't be worried about it type situation. But let me give you a heads up on how nitpicky they're being right now. This is not my client. This is secondhand from another individual who I respect, whose client, somebody on their team, when they were in grad school a decade ago, co-authored a paper with an individual who is from mainland China. And they have had no contact since then. They don't have any professional or personal relationship. This was deemed by the individuals at DoD reviewing Volume 7 to be reason enough for the company to be denied a Phase 1 award from DoD. So just, again, keep that in mind as you're answering these questions. You know, answer them fully, answer them honestly, don't hide anything, but also answer it in a way that it hopefully diffuses somebody from coming to that conclusion that a 10-year-old paper that you co-wrote with somebody is still relevant to your foreign relationships. All right. Just, you know, again, the DSIP website that you have to use for submitting your proposal has a dashboard. It kind of shows you your progress, but it also tells you that you can't rely on it, because when DSIP says you've submitted everything, it doesn't mean you've actually submitted everything required by that component of the military for that particular release. So, you know, just a caution, use the dashboard, but don't totally rely on it. General DoD instructions are not used very much. The CBD example I gave you a while ago is pretty unusual that a component is still using the general instructions. All the big ones, Navy, Air Force, Army, are all using their own instructions now. Largely replaced. The general instructions are largely replaced. Occasionally you will see a conflict, and that's what I was describing to you a while ago, where one set of instructions said, give us a 1-part abstract, and the other instruction said, give us a 2-part abstract. And in this case, I followed my own advice here and actually asked for a ruling on which did we need to do. And now I have that in writing in case there's ever any question about that. Just a quick example of the variability from one DoD Phase 1 submission to another. And just look at the page count is a good starting point. AFWERX 5 pages, Navy 10, the military standard is 20 pages. So 3 different examples, 3 different page limit required. This goes on for a number of pages. I just want to point to a couple of key ones. Number 1, I mentioned this before, emphasize the DoD use when you're discussing commercialization in your DoD proposal. Okay. Needs to focus on, and what I'm showing is 80% of it ought to be about this component. So if this is proposals going to Navy, 80% ought to be about how you're going to get this into the Navy warfighter's hands. Then another 10% can be about how you're going to get it into the Army and Air Force's hands. And then the last 10% is how are you going to get this into the shelves at Walmart? But it ought to be that sort of emphasis on the warfighter, and the warfighter needs to be discussed first, not last, as I sometimes see it. Let's see. Number 6, again, purpose of phase 1 is prove technical feasibility. So you need to have that as a point of emphasis in your phase 1 proposal with some quantified measures of how you're going to determine whether something is technically feasible or not. Number 8, I see this a lot where there'll just be a graphic stuck in a proposal with no explanation, no justification, nothing. And you are risking that the reviewer, number 1, will not even bother to try to figure it out, in which case you wasted your time putting that graphic together. Or, this is even worse, they look at it and draw a different conclusion than you did, than you want them to. So what you want to do is you want to hold their hand and you want to say, basically, look at figure 4. The figure 4 tells you that, or as shown in figure 4, you can see that, or table 6 shows our advantages exceed any of the competing solutions twofold. And now the reviewer looks at table 6 and goes, look at that. Yeah, they got a lot more advantages. Okay. Number 9, the one component that really wants options is Navy, and they require it. You know, when you see the word option, it sounds like, well, you can ask for it or not. That's not what they mean when they say option. Option means it's up to Navy to decide whether they want to exercise it or not. But you have to include the option in your proposal. It must be included. If you don't, then the proposal will be rejected by the rules police before it ever gets a technical review. Number 11, key when you're trying to describe the work plan, the research plan, describe how you're going to do the work. That gives you that detail that they're looking for. Key persons, number 13, when you're listing your key people, it's not just your employees, but also consultants and subcontractors, if they are also key people in the overall project. Number 15, something really irritating is saying the same thing, see it again, see it again, see it again. So you say something in the abstract, and then you say it verbatim at the start of volume 2. And then when you get to the latter part of volume 2, here's the same thing a third time, and it's literally the same words. Really irritating to the reviewer because you're wasting their time by just saying the same thing. You say, but it's good to repeat ideas. Yeah, ideas. Repeat ideas. Don't repeat verbiage. So say it one way and then say it differently the second time. So the first time, if I'm giving you directions on how to get from Little Rock to Memphis, I might just say, you know, get on I-40 and head east. And if you look puzzled at me, I shouldn't say, get on I-40 and go east. You know, I'm just repeating the same thing. I'm not helping. But if you give me a puzzled look after I've said, get on I-40 and go east, I might say, okay, you got a GPS? Okay, what you want to do is plug in St. Jude. St. Jude will take you, it'll take you right on I-40, show you all the turns through town to get you right to that part of Memphis. So say it a different way the second time. And maybe between the first description and the second description, then the reviewer has a better understanding of what you're trying to do. If the component offers you a template, use it. Basically, when they offer you a template, it is saying, we think this is a really useful tool for you to organize your proposal the way we want to see it. And if you ignore it, you're basically saying, well, this was a stupid idea. This is a stupid template. It doesn't really help. It doesn't organize the way the thing should be anyway. Well, you never want to tell your potential customer that they're stupid, and that's what you're doing by not using their template. Now, Navy doesn't say, gee, please use these templates if you want to. They mandate it. They are template happy at Navy. They will want you to use their template. If you don't use it, your proposal may very well be thrown out by the rules police. Now, remember, I said this earlier, the DSIP website, DoD, SBIR STTR.mil has many templates. They're only useful for uploading your content into the online portal. They're not useful for kind of thinking through your proposal and getting it organized. Number 18, here's an idea. In the section called objectives, why don't you include some objectives? Now you go, well, duh. You know, I wouldn't put it in here if I saw it all the time. I see a lot of proposals where section called objectives, there's no objectives in there. And part of that may be not understanding what an objective is. So I give you a little bit of an idea there. It's kind of a, in my opinion, it's a kind of an intermediate accomplishment between the start of phase one, the end of phase one, reaching the conclusion about feasibility. It's not as broad as a goal, but it's also not as narrow as a task. And in a phase one, rule of thumb is have between somewhere in two and four objectives. All right. If you're submitting to AFWERX, and again, this could be different on September 11th. We don't know what they're going to come out with instructions, but in recent years, they wanted a 25-slide PowerPoint presentation. This is available to you as an example of that. And this is showing the first 15 of those slides in their example. What's valuable here in the text box, what's shown in yellow highlight are suggestions, commentary by AFWERX about what they like, what they want you to do. That's very helpful. But in general, if you look at these and look at how wordy they are, there is not a single graphic in those 15 PowerPoint slides. That's pathetic. I mean, PowerPoints are for projecting. You're going to project nothing but words to the audience. And they're not just words, they're sentences, they're paragraphs. You don't put that on a view graph. It ought to be phrases. So this is, in my opinion, this is a horrible example of what to do, but at least take a look at it. Look at the yellow comments to get some ideas, and then get rid of the long sentences and paragraphs, put in phrases, and put in some graphics. All right. So we found a topic, we talked to the agency, we got electronic submission set, we drafted the proposal. Now, before you submit it, get it reviewed. Now, why is that? Because you say, oh, I'm using spell checker. I don't really need to have anybody review it. Well, you use spell checker, but you don't trust it. Why? Because, okay, spell checker will catch that, right? But did it catch that? No, it didn't. Why? Because rust is a perfectly legitimate word, isn't it? So you just said, I use spell checker, but I don't rust it. Well, that's kind of goofy. That's why you need a human to take a look at this, because spell checker is not going to catch everything. I see asses in proposals all the time. Incredible number of asses. Why? Because assess is a fairly common word in a proposal. And what happens if you're typing fairly fast and you're typing assess and you just drop that last S off of it? You got asses. You hit spell checker. What does spell checker do when it hits asses? Oh yeah, it's just a bunch of donkeys standing together. Let's keep going. It has no problem with asses. So you need somebody to read this thing that's going to hopefully catch things like rust and asses out there. Also, I'm going to guarantee you're going to miss something important in the instructions. And this is especially true with the DoD. I would say maybe 40% of the time when I'm given a DoD proposal to review, the author has used the wrong instructions or has misinterpreted the instructions. So if that's happening frequently like that, then you need somebody who can see what you wrote, look at what they understand to be the instructions, and say, gee, I just don't see how what you wrote aligns with what the instructions are here. Get somebody to review this thing that wasn't involved in writing the proposal in the first place. So it could be somebody in your company if you've got extra employees that weren't involved in writing. You got a highly critical spouse or teenager, get some benefit out of that criticism, get them to review it. Really, anyone who can read and pay attention to detail and who is willing to criticize you. Because what you don't want is the loving spouse that says, oh, you just are such a marvelous writer and these such cool ideas, and I really love what you do here. No, that's not what your reviewers are going to say. The real reviewers are going to say, well, I don't understand this, and there's a leap of faith over here, and that's not spelled right, and I don't like the way you said that, and they're critical. So you need somebody who will likewise be critical of you. Interest of time, I won't go through these, but you might get some humor out of some of the many typos that I have seen over the years that spell checker was just happy about these things. There's asses right there. Engine fouling, you know, FOWLING, that's what happens when you hit a chicken there on I-40. Or advanced spitting, that was a proposal about splinting. It was about, you know, a new idea for how you could splint a broken limb. And they were touting the experience of the PI and small typo. And they said, well, they're certified in advanced spitting. And I'm thinking, wow, they must be like a Major League Baseball player part-time or something. You know, they're good at crotch grabbing and spitting. I wonder if they can do anything related to splinting. And of course, it was a typo, and spell checker was just fine with that. And none of these were caught by spell checker. And this is just a partial list of the things I've seen over the years. So a shameless way to lead in to say, yes, I do review proposals. If you're interested in a review, shoot me an email. We can talk about it. And Karen will talk to you here in a few minutes about Phase 0 program or other resources that she might be able to make available to help cover the cost of something like that. The cost, I've left a blank down there. We charge, I can't say what others do. We charge $450 to review a Phase 1 proposal from any agency. Common mistakes, like a clarity consistency. One section doesn't make sense in the other section. It's very bureaucratically written. It's written using big, long words, long convoluted sentences. It's a pain in the patoot to read, much less understand. That's a common problem. Kind of the opposite of that, number 2, is this kind of this leap of faith of give us the money, trust us, we'll do good things. Number 3, you never even mention innovation in your proposal. Number 4, similarly, the proposal never says we will prove the feasibility of, or we need to determine the feasibility of, or this will be key in our conclusion about the feasibility of our innovation. 5, very common. You're just, you know, you're very excited about this stuff. You're very deep into it. You've been doing this for years. Most normal, well-adjusted people don't care about what you do. And so don't sit there and bore them to tears by going page after page after page. Number 6, rules police. If you fail to follow the instructions, the rules police will get you. Number 8, make sure your team looks like you've got the bases covered. What are the gaps? Are there any gaps on the team in terms of your qualifications? Reviewers oftentimes point out where they see apparent gaps where you don't have a particular key capability or skill covered. Step number 6, submit this puppy and submit it early. There's been a misunderstanding, in my opinion, that electronic submission means you can just kind of submit it at the last minute. It's a bad idea, guys, because these pipelines, these electronic pipelines can get clogged and can crash. DoD had that happen. It's probably been 6 or 7 years ago now. Their SBIR website crashed because of too many people trying to submit at one time. Figure things will go wrong. You know, something will be missing, or a file won't get uploaded, or it's in the wrong format, or you didn't put the right name on it or something. And if this is your first proposal, you may find there are inconsistencies in your registration. The example is in my company name, it's Greenwood Consulting Group, Inc., period. If one of my registrations has Greenwood Consulting Group, Inc., period, and my next registration is Greenwood Consulting Group, no comma, Inc., period, and then my third registration is Greenwood Consulting Group, no comma, no period, then by the federal government's understanding, those are 3 different companies. And that's going to cause all sorts of havoc when I'm trying to upload my proposal. And, you know, trying to figure that out is tough 5 days in advance. It's impossible when you got an hour and a half until the deadline. And this help desk, remember our little DoD help desk only open 9 to 5 Eastern time, Monday to Friday. Got to email your questions. It's not going to work to try to get the help desk the last day. So my recommendation is start your upload 5 days in advance. Now, you think that's impossible or ridiculously far in advance? Fine, do it 3 days in advance. But the point is, don't do it at the last minute. My record is reviewing. This was a DOE proposal, due at 11:59 p.m. And at 10:20 p.m., I'm still reviewing it and getting my comments to the company. Now, again, you know, you got no time by the time you even get my comments to make any real changes, much less get the thing uploaded and make sure it all gets there in the next hour and 40 minutes. Ridiculous. Final step, we found our topic, we talk with the agency, we get electronic registration done, we draft proposal, we get a review, we revise, we submit the puppy, then we wait for a response. And once we get a response, we are going to ask for a debrief. Basically, once the agency has reviewed all of its proposals and decided which ones they want to fund, those that are not getting funded are entitled to feedback, or the terminology is debrief, get a debrief. Some agencies, just submitting a proposal, they will send this to you, this debrief to you automatically. And they'll send it to you win or lose. That's what NIH does, NSF does. What about the military? Nope, not going to happen. DoD will not send it until winners have been announced. You then have a limited time, and it depends on the component, but figure a few days to request a debrief. It's only available if you lost, not if you won. And once you get it, it's generally a few sentences and not very helpful. But, you know, it's worth asking for. See if you can get it. You're looking for, what did the reviewers like about my proposal? What didn't they like? What did they misunderstand? What didn't I convey? And what you're trying to do is learn from your mistakes. What did I do wrong? Okay, they said that there was too little description of my tasks. Okay, so what I learned is reviewers like detail on tasks. So when I write my next SBIR proposal, I will go into detail about the task. See, that means your proposal was not in vain. You've learned a very important lesson for future proposals. You can also use the debrief on whether you should resubmit. You know, you submit a proposal, it doesn't get funded, you read the debrief and it says, I like this, but there were just some things that bothered me, or the lack of anyone with the ability to make a statistical analysis just was too much for me to recommend it for funding. Well, that's stuff you can fix, right? So you revise it and you resubmit it next time. Now, if it says instead, this is the most idiotic, stupid, mundane, ridiculous, impossible, off the wall, harebrained, idiotic idea I think I have ever seen in my lifetime, then I don't think you need to spend a lot of time going, gee, I wonder if I had to resubmit. They have told you basically that you are crazy, or at least your ideas are crazy, and they don't want to hear from you again. So save your time. Now, that's a grant agency. What about a contract agency? Well, even if the military gives you a decent debrief and it kind of points out that there are some minor errors, very seldom can you resubmit a DoD SBIR STTR proposal. Very seldom, because the topics are offered one time and one time only. Now, exception to that would be the AFWERX open topic, because it is so broad. Maybe the Navy one I've been telling you about, but again, we're talking 97% of DoD topics are not going to be candidates for resubmission. Ask for a debrief even if you won. Now, the military has said, we're not going to give you a debrief if you won. So you know what you do? If you win, one of the first tasks you should have in your DoD project should be a kickoff meeting, preferably in person, preferably at the DoD TPOX installation. And part of that meeting is you asking, was there anything in our proposal that wasn't clear, you didn't think we should be doing, or have suggestions about? And what are you doing? You're basically asking for a verbal debrief. And it's not only so you understand things they didn't like, but also you now have some homework that you can be working on during the phase one. And if you address those concerns and tell them how you've addressed them and you've satisfied them, that puts you in a better position for phase two. This was a list from DoD. I've added a couple of things to it, or modified a couple of things, but it's basically from DoD, things that they would advise. Again, number one, if there's a template, follow the template. Number two, follow the sequence. Don't move the sections around. Present the sections in the order that the instructions have them. That's what the reviewers are used to seeing. Why is that still in there? I know I have seen that exceed, number three, exceed should be just exceed. I don't know why that is still in there. I think I have taken that out at least a couple of times. You would think spell checker would have caught that, wouldn't you? Number five, don't submit the last minute. Number eight, make sure you explain what is innovative about your approach. Number seven, how does what you're proposing have anything to do with what they're requesting in the topic? There are a number of instances where somebody tries to force fit a topic that they want to get funded around a topic that really doesn't make any sense. Number 10, again, how's your project going to make this situation better for the warfighter? How do they benefit from this? And number 13, make sure you include all 7 volumes. A couple of years ago, some allowed only required 5 volumes. A few required 6. Within the past, I would say 16, 18 months, all 6 volumes were required. And as I told you, like within the last 45 days, all 7 volumes are now required for all components. As I kind of close out my portion, then I'll ask Karen to talk a little bit about the Phase 0 program, and we'll take any final questions that folks have. I want to make you aware of a tax issue related to SBIR STTR that, God, this should have been resolved by now, but Congress. Do I have to say anything else? Congress. Congress passed legislation back in 2017 that changed the IRS's laws, the Internal Revenue Code. And it had a 5-year window until this requirement or this change became effective. And what this change says is, when you incur, when you do R&D and you incur expenses like labor, materials, subcontracts, so on, when you do R&D, instead of writing those expenses off in the year that you incur them, like people had been doing for decades, no, R&D is really an asset, and therefore you need to write it off over a 5-year time frame. And what they were thinking was this was a way to get more tax revenue out of the, the Raytheons and the Boeings and the big companies that do a lot of our federal R&D stuff. Well, because they were previously allowed to be deducted in the year they were written off, this was a massive hit to SBIR STTR companies because they would incur, say, $50,000 in SBIR R&D expenses one year, and they would write off those 50,000. They would write off the full 50,000 that year, and therefore have no or minimal tax liability for it. Now it says you would not write off the full 50,000 that year. You'd only write off 10,000 that year, and then write off 10,000 the next year and the next year, and then over 5 years. So now you've got revenue, let's say, of 50,000 coming in from SBIR. You don't have 50,000 in expenses to write off to offset it. You only got 10,000. So now you got a $40,000 net income that you're paying taxes on. So SBIR recipients were seeing their tax liability just go crazy because of this. Well, Congress sees that there's a problem, can't get their act together to fix it. So people have tried to come up with some creative solutions. One was there's another part of the revenue code, Internal Revenue Code, that you might use that does allow you to write it off rather than amortize it. But then the IRS, which comes out with draft guidance on how they're going to implement this part of this new legislation, said you can't do the 162, the other section. They prohibited that, so they shot that down. The IRS got a lot of criticism for their draft guidance, including from yours truly. I have not seen anything final from them. That's been at least a year ago. Congress sees there's a problem. The House has taken action. Now, I got to put action in parentheses or quotation marks here because action in the House was they were just going to delay implementation by 3 years. Now, I guess you can surmise that maybe they think they can solve this problem over 3 years, and so just delaying it isn't good enough for right now. It's the old kick the can down the street, right? Thing Congress does on the deficit and so on the borrowing money. They just kick the can. They don't solve the problem. They just kick the can. But at least the House did something. They passed a 3-year delay in the implementation of this legislation. The Senate goes over to the Senate for them to consider it. Well, it's tied to some child care tax credit legislation, and the Republicans won't accept it. Let me say, some Republicans will not accept it. And of course, you want to blame the Republicans. Well, then you can also blame the Democrats who tied this legislation to the child care tax credit, trying to force the Republicans to accept it. So whichever party you'd like to blame, I just blame Congress in general because they're so screwed up. So that's where we stand right now, guys. So what do you want to do? Now, 2 suggestions. One is take a look at sbtc.org, smallbusinesstechnologycouncil.org, about this issue. The second is, and this comes from, this is not me. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not a lawyer. But a suggestion was made to me that the IRS definition of R&D is pretty narrow and would not include your entire SBIR budget. And so you use that narrow interpretation of what is actually R&D expense and has to be amortized over 5 years. So out of let's say $100,000 phase 1, it's maybe only 20,000 out of the 100,000. So then out of 20,000, rather than writing off that 20,000, you're only going to write off 4,000 each year for the next 5 years. So you're going to have a tax liability on, in that example, $16,000. Now, tax liability on 16,000 is not to be ignored, but it's a heck of a lot better than a tax liability on what would be 90,000. No, I didn't do that right. 80,000, because we would write off 20,000 out of 100,000 per year if we were doing the full 100,000. So you're gonna have a much lower tax bill if you do that. So those are two suggestions. With that, let me still have, looks like about 5 minutes. Let me turn it back, ask Meredith first if we have some quick questions we can address, and then see if Karen would like to speak about the Phase Zero program and so forth.
Thank you, Jim. Wow, we don't have any questions actively in the Q&A or the
Okay.
chat.
All right.
Karen, did you want to address that before we wrapped address your portion before we wrapped up?
Yeah, I'm hopping back on. Okay, so yeah, well, I had put one question up in the chat related when Jim was talking about the foreign ownership concerns. And then fortunately, Kimberly saw that and answered that besides helping with SAM.gov registrations, the federal registrations, Kimberly at Arkansas APEX said that they also help guide you through those FOCI issues as implemented by the DCSA. And honestly, I don't work in this space all the time. I had to look up what DCSA is. The Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency is the one who is requiring that vetting of these foreign entities and your relationship to them. Also, I put in the chat while Jim was talking about the tax law, the amortization issue that has really impacted these your ability to navigate as a small business. If you're lucky enough to win these awards and then you have these tax liabilities, it really hampers your ability to navigate as you're doing your product development and carrying the work out as a pre-venture or an early venture, or even a young or even a mature company that is taking on a new R&D project. So we just happen to have the Sycamore document on the tax law. You mentioned the Sycamore CPA firm, so I went ahead and dropped that in if anybody's interested in the getting ahead of that issue. I mean, obviously you don't have to worry about it until you win an award, but I wanted to thank Jim for, again, the deep and rich knowledge, and it's a lot. I know it's like drinking from a fire hose, and you are welcome to stay on this webinar circuit, because I have to say I've been doing this job for a year, and no matter how many times I hear about DoD stuff, because it is constantly changing, it's helpful to keep attending these and stay on top of it and begin your process if you want to develop a relationship with a DoD component. And it's important to begin, as Jim has been talking about, it's important to understand their language, how they approach their work, how they approach these partnerships, and what you can do to become one of the favored vendors, because the whole point of all the pain and suffering that we've been disclosing over the past 3.5 hours is that if you can get past some of the difficulties and the challenges and the rigor, you're sort of being raised to a new bar of being able to be in that elite group that works with the government. And yes, there are some bureaucratic issues, and all the agencies who offer SBIR STTR awards operate in a similar fashion in terms of the way they approach seeking your partnership or your solutions. But the experience that you have with each of them is different in terms of how they communicate with you, and how much time you can spend with your point of contact and that sort of thing that Jim was talking about. But ultimately, we have found that the frontline people, regardless of whether it's DoD PTOCs or if it's a program manager, which is what the others call themselves, is that they really are customer facing. Their jobs are to actually help you understand and navigate their complex systems, and they are looking for good ideas. They want to partner. And in a sense, besides the de-risking of the technology, in a way, they're sort of helping us. The federal government is helping us privatize science and R&D, research, to the extent that it has commercial value. So different from basic research, this is really, regardless of which agency, whether it's a granting agency or a contract agency, they're looking for ideas that can help solve big problems in the world, regardless of how you start. So just wrapping that up, and also wanted to say that we are talking about, if you are ready, if you have an idea or an active proposal in mind and are looking for a DoD BAA or solicitation to meet, and Jim mentioned the 4 that are currently the biggies that are open right now, and I put those links in the chat as well. If you're looking around and you want an initial meeting of 25 minutes, Jim is offering 25 minutes. And these need, again, your idea needs to be sort of active and ready to go. And we're talking about assistance for Arkansas-based companies only at this point. Again, I'm sorry that our grant limits our ability to work only with Arkansas-based companies for this particular offer. So we're talking about 25 minutes of his initial time. And then if the idea is developable and you are ready within that, say, 60-day time frame, sometimes less, as Jim was pointing out, if you're ready to submit or prepare a proposal in answer to a specific opportunity, as much as I would like, and we don't usually recommend working together unless you have at least 90 days to get ready, and sometimes 120 days. And that's partly because, that it takes preparation to put a team together. You need to align, all of the pieces of the proposal to your real world, make sure that you're gathering, assembling, and confirming everything that you need to complete the proposal. It usually is difficult to do even in 90 days, but if you end up with 60 days, we're talking about trying to do it. And the Arkansas Economic Development Commission does offer, in the state of Arkansas, if you're in active pursuit of a particular solicitation, they have a grant in phase 0, a sort of pre-development of the idea, that is up to $5,000 to assist with professional services related to winning or proposing to win a phase 1 award. So if you've identified it, it's phase 1, you're going after it, you can fill out and we can help you apply for the TTAG, and then that money can be used to hire a coach, or Jim was talking about, he does proposal review. Jim, you said it was $450 for the proposal review.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, our TTAGs go up to $5,000, and that's to allow for more one-on-one time, more coaching through the process. Do you have a range beyond the $450 in terms of more hours, or do you just limit it to a one-time review?
That's a one-pass review, and basically not discussion time or brainstorming afterwards. So anything before or afterwards, I just do on an hourly basis, and I charge $130 for that. And I like to have some sort of pre-agreed not to exceed amount between the company and myself, so I know what I've got to work with, but also they know their maximum obligation. But
okay,
I would say most engagements like that, we're, even with quite a bit of one-on-one time, we're looking at $1,000, $1,500, something like that.
okay, well, that's good. Good to know. So there's your range in terms of what you can go for, and that, like I say, our TTAG grants in Arkansas usually fall well within that. And we can get them done now. The TTAGs, again, are not a fast process. It takes at least 2 weeks. It's sometimes longer because they have a review process where they, have a review, have a committee, have the board approval to
Mhm.
let go of that money, and in the time it takes to issue the check. But the check goes to the small business who makes the application. And that is true, by the way, of SBIR STTR, regardless of whether you work for a research institution or another group. The SBIRs and any related state matching funds go to the small business. So I hope we made that clear through the whole thing, through the whole presentation today. So what I'm offering to do is, in the follow-up email that Meredith is going to send, there's going to be a link to a short survey that will allow you, if you're an Arkansas-based company, to drop in your information regarding your readiness and all the details associated with your current idea to follow up on a DoD opportunity. So if you have it ready, fill out the survey, send it to me. We'll get back in touch with you. If you don't have it ready, skip it this time, but stay in touch with us. Get on the listserv, the DoD listserv, and then ASB TDC. My email is KBERGH. There's an H on the end. Karen, old-fashioned spelling, KAREN, but the email is KBERGH@ulr.edu. So you can always send me an email, and I can get you in touch with Kimberly as well. I think we put her, yes, I put her email in the chat as well. So if you want to contact her directly, you can. And that's for help with the registrations and the foreign involvement assistance. And let's see, we wanted to talk about TTAG, the offer to work with Jim one-on-one. And I think that's all that I had.
You know,
If anybody else, there weren't any additional questions. I'm gonna look one more time. I see one little red.
one thing we didn't do, Karen,
Yeah.
which is unusual for this, with the military, we got to teach them how to pronounce SBIR and STTR, because the
Oh, yeah.
military, of course, turns these
Yes.
into words. So if
SBIR.
you guys really want to get serious about this, it's not SBIR, it's SBIR.
SBIR
And
and
it's not
SITR.
STTR, it's sitter. So talk
That's
SBIR and
true.
sitter. Now, if you go
That,
around
oh,
and apply to NSF, don't use those terms or they'll whack you upside the head, because
that is so
no one but
funny.
the military uses it, but they
That's very true.
like their words. So
That's very true. I was like a kid who'd fallen off the farm truck when I went to my first Tech Connect a year ago. And I heard SBIR and SITR, and I heard TPOC, and then the event had thousands of people at it and all the agencies were there, but I kept hearing that and going, why are they calling it that? And nobody else is. And so it was a quick sort of like introduction to the differences between the agencies, but also like you said, it's some of the good things are that if you can wind your way through the difficulties, then you can end up in a pretty good situation with a long-term customer. And we didn't talk about phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 a lot, but you can always look at the direct solicitation to see what the funding amount is, and what's being offered, and also typically how long it takes to hear back on your proposal. Jim, in your experience, DoD like, is it kind of like the others where it could be 4 months before you hear anything after you submit? Or
I have one client who heard back in probably 3 weeks, which is probably a new record.
Whoa.
And
Okay.
can be as long as 6 months. So
okay, so it's pins and needles after you submit hit the button and DSIP, and you've done all the work and everything's perfect, and even after maybe there's some errors when you submit the final upload and everything's done, and you can correct the errors and get everything tip-top shape for their review. There's really no way for us to predict when you will hear back. So I would just say, don't ever count on America's Seed Fund funding as your only source of income while you're in this product development stage. And that also, if you're looking at this as an opportunity to help build something, consider it a supplement, I guess is what I'm really trying to say. is that it's a great help, but it's not the only. You're going to need to be able to finance your work, or friends and family, or something else to help you get through some of these early stages, the 6 months, a year to 3 years kind of thing. So thank you all for hanging in there. I know we've gone over time, and some people did drop off at 12:02, but we are recording this and we'll send the whole package out later, along the recording with the slides, and also the link to the survey that I mentioned for Arkansas-based companies. So thank you all again for your attention. And Jim, thank you as always for your deep and wide knowledge and the insights, because I do feel like when we have you here that it's we get an insider's view, and a deeper understanding, because you're watching them for us, and you're talking to them on our behalf, which we appreciate. So it's great to have you translate this for us, and also serve as our ambassador and advisor.
Thanks.
So that's
glad to help out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Thanks,
we'll be
Meredith,
in touch.
for your work.
Yep. Thanks, Meredith, as
Take care.
always. Thanks, Kimberly. And thank you, Apex. And we'll see y'all next time.
Right.